The world can wait. For now, just get comfortable, breathe deeply, and let some sleepy history wash over you. The rooster's crow slices through the pre-dawn mist like a 9th-century alarm clock, jarring you awake in your humble Saxon dwelling in Wessex. The air is crisp, and the sun is just a rumour on the horizon, but don't hit that snooze button. There's no time for lollygagging. Your day as a Saxon farmer begins in the early hours, because if there's one thing the 9th century demands, it's a robust work ethic with a side of porridge. Step outside your door, and the first thing you notice is the smell. It's earthy, like a history book that's been kissed by the fields. You take it in, along with a deep breath, because your lungs aren't going to fill themselves. The land around you is more than just your backyard. It's your livelihood, your grocery store, and, let's face it, your gym all rolled into one. You're in Wessex, a kingdom that's been the beating heart of Anglo-Saxon England, smack dab in the middle of a power struggle that's as complex as a soap opera plot. But hey, that's for the nobles to worry about. Today, your world revolves around the soil and the sweat of your brow. The economic context of the time isn't a spreadsheet of numbers, but a patchwork quilt of fields and livestock. Agriculture is the name of the game, and you, my friend, are one of its unsung players. You're not just growing food, you're feeding a kingdom, one barley grain at a time. Now, let's talk crops. Wheat, barley and rye. They're the holy trinity of your agricultural endeavours. Wheat is the prima donna, the one everyone wants a piece of, used for bread that gets devoured faster than the latest gossip. Barley, on the other hand, is the rough-and-tumble cousin, versatile for both bread and beer, which, let's be honest, is as close to liquid gold as it gets. Rice sits a bit lower on the pecking order, but still pulls its weight when the soil's not playing nice. But before you can daydream about warm loaves and frothy mugs, you've got to get those seeds in the ground. This isn't a romanticised scene from a pastoral painting where you lazily toss seeds with a backdrop of rolling hills. Nope. This is back-breaking labour, with a wooden plough and oxen that move at the speed of, well, oxen. Your hands are calloused, your back is sore, and if you're lucky, you might catch a break before your stomach starts grumbling louder than the livestock. Speaking of which, livestock is as important as the crops you grow. Cows, pigs, sheep and chickens, they're not just animals, they're your walking, bar-ing, oinking bank accounts. Cows give milk, leather, and the occasional steak for special occasions, while sheep provide wool, which is essentially the currency of comfort when winter winds start biting. Pigs? Well, pigs are the bacon bearers, and if you're not salivating over that thought, you might be in the wrong century. And those chickens, don't underestimate them. Eggs are the gift that keeps on giving, unless you count the ear-splitting morning crow as part of the package. Now, let's debunk a romantic notion that's been floating around like a misguided balloon, the idea that living off the land is some idyllic, carefree existence. Sure, there's a certain charm to it, but the reality is as gritty as the dirt under your nails. You're constantly at the mercy of Mother Nature, who is as unpredictable as she is powerful. A bad harvest isn't just an inconvenience, it's a potential disaster, threatening to upend your entire way of life. And did I mention the taxes? Yep, the local lord has his hand out, expecting a cut of your hard-earned produce faster than you can say feudal obligations. As the sun climbs higher, so does your to-do list. There's weeding to be done, animals to be fed, and tools to be mended. You're part farmer, part blacksmith, part veterinarian, and all hustler. But don't think for a moment that your efforts go unnoticed. In this world, the village depends on you and your fellow farmers to keep the community humming along. It's a delicate ecosystem where every grain and every hoof counts. So, as you plough through your morning routine, remember that you're not just a cog in the wheel of the Saxon economy, you're the engine. Your work keeps Wessex thriving, one seed, one animal, one drop of sweat at a time. And though the day has barely begun, you've already accomplished more than most modern folks do before their first coffee of the day. Here's to you, the Saxon farmer, the unsung hero of the 9th century. Now, let's keep those ploughs turning and those animals fed, because history waits for no one, especially not a hungry farmer. As the sun climbs over the horizon, casting its first warm rays on the Wessex fields, let's pause to shed some light on the social ladder you're climbing, or maybe just leaning against. In 9th century Saxon England, society as a complex web of roles and responsibilities, like a medieval LinkedIn with a dash of Game of Thrones. You, my industrious friend, are a Seorol, the Anglo-Saxon equivalent of the working class, but with slightly more flair and a lot more mud. Your life is shaped by a hierarchy that starts with the king, perched at the top like a medieval CEO, holding the power to make or break your day with a single decree. Below him are the Thens, the noble landlords who, quite literally, lord over the land and its people. These are the guys with the fancy swords, the shiny armor, and the kind of influence that makes the rest of us quake in our muddy boots. The Thens are responsible for the protection of their domains, overseeing justice, and collecting taxes. Essentially the original multitaskers, minus the smartphone. Now, let's not forget the church, the spiritual backbone of Saxon society. With monks and priests wielding influence like a farmer wields a plough, religion isn't just a Sunday affair, it's a daily reality that permeates every aspect of life. Laws are often a divine decree away from a sermon, and the church's landholdings make them a power player in the economic game. The church, in cahoots with the king and Therns, forms a trifecta of authority that keeps the kingdom ticking like a well-oiled, God-fearing machine. But back to you, the Seol. You're not exactly living the high life, but you're not dirt poor either. You're one of the free peasants, owning your own land, working it with the sweat from your brow and little help from an ox or two. Your social status might not get you into the king's banquet, but it does give you a certain degree of autonomy. And in a world where freedom is as valuable as a fattened pig, that's no small potatoes. Your obligations, though, are as numerous as the weeds in your field. You're expected to pay taxes, provide military service when called upon, and participate in the local moot, the Anglo-Saxon version of a town hall meeting, where community matters and disputes are aired out like dirty laundry. It's a system of checks and balances, with the emphasis often on the checks of the financial kind. Family life is your anchor, your support system in a world that can be as unforgiving as a drought-stricken summer. Saxon families are tight-knit, with roles defined as clearly as the furrows in your field. Men work the land and handle external affairs, while women manage the household, weaving, cooking, and raising the next generation of sorrels. Don't be fooled, though. Women wield significant influence within the domestic sphere, and their contributions are as crucial as any warrior's battlefield exploits. And let's talk about marriage, which in Saxon society is less about romance and more about strategic alliances. Marriages are often arranged, with dowries exchanged like commodities in a medieval stock market. It's about securing land, forming alliances, and ensuring the lineage continues. Love might eventually sprout like wildflowers in a field, but the initial seed is planted in practicality. Children are both a blessing and a necessity. With many hands needed to keep the farm running, your offspring are your legacy and your workforce. They learn early, taking on chores as soon as they can walk straight, their education a mix of practical skills and the occasional church-taught lesson. Childhood is a brief phase, swiftly transitioning into the responsibilities of adulthood, because in a world without playstations, the fields are the ultimate playground. Now let's debunk a myth that's as stubborn as a mule, the notion that Saxon farmers lived in isolation, cut off from the rest of society. In reality, your life is a tapestry woven with community threads. Villages are tight-knit, with neighbours depending on each other for trade, support, and the occasional gossip session over a communal meal. You're part of a living, breathing ecosystem, where every action reverberates through the community like ripples in a pond. As the day stretches on, the sun your constant companion, you juggle your duties with a deftness born of necessity. From tending crops to mending fences, each task is a testament to the Saxon work ethic, relentless, resilient, and occasionally rewarded with a hearty meal and a mug of homemade ale. It's a life of hard work, but also of camaraderie and shared purpose, where the bonds of family and community provide a sturdy foundation in a world that's ever-changing. So, as you wipe the sweat from your brow and gaze across the fields you've toiled over, remember that you're not just a Saxon farmer. You're a vital cog in the machinery of 9th-century Wessex, a world that relies on your labour, your resilience, and your ability to thrive amidst the challenges of the era. The sun may be setting on another day, but your story, like the fields you tend, continues to grow, one season, one generation at a time. As the sun dips low, casting long shadows across the fields, your midday meal is a well-earned intermission, a chance to refuel before diving back into the toils of agrarian life. But this isn't just any meal, it's a Saxon feast where bread, cheese, and maybe a bit of smoked meat take centre stage. A simple spread, yet hearty enough to power you through the afternoon grind. And let's not forget the ale, because what's a Saxon farmer without his liquid courage? Now, let's shift gears from the culinary to the mechanical. You're not just a farmer, you're practically a 9th-century engineer. The tools of your trade are as essential as the crops you grow. Take the ard plough, for instance. It's the unsung hero of your agricultural toolkit, a marvel of Saxon ingenuity that turns the stubborn earth into fertile soil. Forget the gleaming, GPS-equipped tractors of today. This is a wooden frame with an iron-tipped blade, and it's your best friend in the battle against compacted dirt. The ard isn't just a tool, it's a testament to human ingenuity. With it, you can carve furrows into the earth, making room for the seeds that will, hopefully, grow into a bountiful harvest. It's rudimentary, sure, but don't let its simplicity fool you. This plough is the difference between a barren field and a breadbasket. And while it might not win any beauty contests, it's efficient, like a medieval Swiss Army knife for the soil. But let's not romanticize this too much. When you're sweating under the sun, coaxing the ard through rocky ground, it's less a bucolic scene from a pastoral painting and more a gritty workout session. The oxen pulling this contraption? They're the original heavy lifters, and they move at a pace that makes a sloth look like an Olympic sprinter. Yet, without them, you'd be as stuck as a medieval knight in quicksand. Now, speaking of teamwork, communal farming is where it's at. Farming isn't a solo gig, it's a community affair, a medieval co-op of sorts. Picture this. Your village bands together, pooling resources and manpower to tackle the beast that is agriculture. It's like a medieval version of a barn raising, but with more mud and fewer Instagram posts. And let's face it, without this collective effort, you'd be up the proverbial creek without a paddle. In this communal setup, everyone has a role. Someone's mending tools, another's wrangling wayward cattle, and you're likely knee-deep in furrows, keeping the plough moving. It's a symphony of labour, each person a note in the melody of survival. Sure, there's the occasional off-key moment, like when the oxen decide they've had enough and plop down for an impromptu siesta. But overall, it's a well-orchestrated endeavour. And here's a myth that needs busting, the one where Saxon life is painted as a primitive, isolated existence. Cue the eye roll. The truth is, Saxons were far from backward. Their agricultural methods were sophisticated for the time, maximising yield and efficiency. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving, using every trick in the book to coax life from the land. It's a testament to their resilience and resourcefulness, qualities that kept them going when the odds were stacked higher than a haystack in harvest season. Let's dig into some specifics. Crop rotation is one of those Saxon secrets that modern agriculture still borrows from today. By alternating the types of crops planted, they kept the soil healthy and productive. It's like giving the land a spa day, minus the cucumber slices and fluffy robes. This technique was a game changer, ensuring that the earth didn't get worn out faster than a pair of your favourite boots. And while we're on the subject of innovation, let's not forget about animal husbandry. The Saxons were practically the original animal whisperers, understanding the value of selective breeding long before it became a scientific endeavour. By choosing the strongest and most productive animals for breeding, they improved their livestock's quality over generations. It's survival of the fittest with a touch of Saxon flair, ensuring that future herds were as robust as they were useful. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Despite the back-breaking work, there's a certain romance to this life. It's a paradox, really. On one hand, you've got the gritty reality of long hours, unpredictable weather, and the ever-present threat of famine. On the other, there's the undeniable satisfaction that comes from watching your efforts transform into tangible, life-sustaining results. It's a dance with nature, one that requires equal parts patience and perseverance. As the afternoon sun begins its descent, casting a golden glow over the fields, you're reminded that farming is as much about the people as it is about the plants. The community's heartbeat is synchronized with the rhythms of the land, a living testament to the power of collective endeavor. It's a world where every hand, every voice, every effort counts. And in this shared labor, there's a sense of camaraderie that transcends the daily grind. So, as you wrap up another day of tilling, sowing and tending, spare a thought for the tools and teamwork that make this all possible. You're not just scratching a living from the earth, you're part of a legacy, a lineage of farmers whose ingenuity and grit have shaped the landscape of Wessex. The sun may be setting, but your story, like the fields you nurture, is far from over. The land waits, ever patient, for the next chapter to unfold, and you, dear Saxon farmer, are the author of that unfolding narrative. But hold that thought, because as the shadows lengthen over your well-tended fields, the focus shifts from the soil to the simmering cauldron of politics. Welcome to Wessex in the age of King Alfred the Great, a man whose legendary status is as oversized as his ambitions. Alfred, as you might know, is the ruler who's trying to keep the Viking raiders at bay while juggling more political balls than a medieval circus act. Let's set the scene. It's the late 9th century, and the Vikings are the medieval equivalent of an unstoppable force in a bad action movie. They've been raiding, pillaging, and generally causing havoc across the British Isles, leaving a trail of destruction that would make any insurance adjuster weep. These Norsemen are like your worst nightmare. Imagine a band of marauders that show up unannounced, take what they want, and then vanish like a bad dream. Enter Alfred, the king, with a plan. Unlike his predecessors, who mostly flailed about like fish out of water when the Vikings came knocking, Alfred decides to up the ante. His solution? Fortifications, baby. Say hello to the burhs, the fortified towns that are Alfred's not-so-secret weapon. These burhs are like medieval panic rooms, designed to protect the kingdom from the marauding hordes. And let's talk numbers. By the end of Alfred's reign, there are about 33 of these burhs scattered across Wessex. Each one is strategically placed within 20 miles of its neighbour, meaning no Saxon farmer is ever too far from a safe haven. It's a smart move, like setting up a series of medieval Wi-Fi hotspots, except instead of boosting your internet speed, they boost your chances of survival. Building these burhs isn't just a matter of throwing up some walls and calling it a day. It takes manpower, resources, and a hefty dose of logistical acumen. Picture this. The average burh requires the labour equivalent of constructing a small pyramid minus the pharaoh's blessing. And who's paying for all this? You guessed it. The good people of Wessex, including our favourite Saxon farmers. It's a classic case of your taxes at work, except instead of paving roads, you're paving the way for Viking deterrence. But don't be fooled into thinking Alfred is just about defence. The man's got political savvy too. He knows that to keep his kingdom intact, he needs more than just strong walls. He needs strong alliances. This is where his diplomatic skills come into play. Alfred is the ultimate medieval networker, forging alliances with neighbouring kingdoms to create a united front against the Viking menace. One of his most crucial alliances is with Mercia, a neighbouring kingdom that's had its own run-ins with the Vikings. Through a combination of marriages and treaties, Alfred manages to bring Mercia into the fold, creating a kind of proto-Anglo-Saxon NATO. It's a masterstroke of diplomacy, but let's not kid ourselves. These alliances are as fragile as a soap bubble. One wrong move, and it's back to square one with the Vikings breathing down your neck. And speaking of diplomacy, let's debunk a myth that's as stubborn as a Viking berserker. Alfred isn't just some noble king with a halo of righteousness. He's a shrewd operator who knows that, sometimes, you've got to play dirty to keep the peace. Whether it's negotiating with Viking leaders or dealing with internal dissent, Alfred isn't afraid to roll up his sleeves and get his hands a bit grubby. It's the kind of realpolitik that would make Machiavelli proud. But here's where the story gets juicy. Alfred's legendary status isn't just built on his military and political prowess. The man's got a knack for PR too. He commissions the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a year-by-year account of the kingdom's history that just so happens to paint him as the hero of the hour. It's like having a medieval spin doctor on retainer, ensuring that Alfred's legacy is as polished as a Saxon shield. Yet, despite all his efforts, the Viking threat is a constant shadow over Wessex. These Norsemen are nothing if not persistent, and their raids continue to test the kingdom's defences. It's a game of cat and mouse, with life and death stakes that keep everyone on edge. For the average Saxon farmer, it means living with the ever-present fear that one day the sky might darken with Viking sails, turning peaceful fields into battlegrounds. But let's not end on a gloomy note. There's a silver lining to all this turmoil. The constant threat of Viking raids forces the Saxons to innovate, to adapt, to become more than just farmers tending their fields. It's a crucible of change, shaping a society that's resilient, resourceful, and ready to face whatever the Northmen throw their way. So, as evening falls and you gather with your fellow villagers to share stories, remember that you're part of something bigger than yourself. You're not just a Saxon farmer, you're a cog in the machine of a kingdom fighting for its very survival. And while the path ahead is fraught with uncertainty, one thing's for sure. In the land of Wessex, history isn't just being made, it's being forged in the fires of conflict and community. The sun sets, casting a warm glow over the landscape, as you and your fellow Saxons prepare for whatever the future holds. Whether it's another day in the fields or the distant rumble of Viking longships, one thing remains constant: the spirit of Wessex, a land of farmers, warriors, and kings, where every day is a new chapter in the unfolding saga of history. And you, dear Saxon, are right in the thick of it, living a life that's as challenging as it is rewarding, as unpredictable as it is enduring. As the sun dips behind the horizon, cloaking the fields in twilight's embrace, your day isn't quite done yet. In the heart of your Saxon village, the evening is a time for communal activities that bring the community together like a medieval block party, minus the DJ, but with plenty of ale. It's a chance to trade stories, share a laugh, and perhaps indulge in a bit of friendly gossip about who's courting whom. The communal hall, or as you might call it, the Saxon social network, is buzzing with life, a vibrant testament to the human need for connection. Gathering around a crackling fire, you and your fellow villagers dive into the evening's entertainment, which is a mix of storytelling, music, and the occasional impromptu wrestling match. The tales spun tonight are rich with heroes and gods, a tapestry woven with threads of history and myth. It's a bit like the Saxon version of Hollywood stories that entertain, inspire, and, let's be honest, stretch the truth like a piece of taffy. Here, the line between fact and fiction blurs faster than you can say Alfred the Great. Speaking of myths, let's dive headfirst into the swirling cauldron of Saxon religion and folklore. The Saxons are a superstitious bunch, and their worldview is shaped by a pantheon of gods and spirits as colourful as it is complex. You've got Woden, the chief of the gods, a character who's as enigmatic as he is powerful, a sort of cosmic CEO with a penchant for disguise. His day, Wednesday, is named in his honour, so next time you're halfway through the week, spare a thought for Woden's mysterious ways. Then there's Thuna, the god of thunder, who wields his hammer with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer at a tea party. He's the Saxon answer to Thor, and his exploits are the stuff of legend. When the thunder rolls and the lightning cracks, it's Thuna at work, reminding everyone to keep their heads down and their axes sharp. Now let's not forget Eostra, the goddess of spring and fertility, whose name has a familiar ring to it. That's right, she's the inspiration behind Easter, a festival that's been co-opted over the centuries, but began as a celebration of rebirth and renewal. Her myths are as vibrant as the spring flowers, embodying the hope that comes with each new season, a reminder that life, much like your crops, is cyclical. But what about the gritty realities of Saxon religion? Well, the Church, with its growing influence, is slowly turning the tide toward Christianity. By the late 9th century, the old gods are starting to share the stage with a new narrative, the story of Christ, whose teachings are spreading across the kingdom like wildfire. This shift isn't just a spiritual one, it's political too. Conversion is both a personal choice and a strategic move, a way to align with the powerful church and its extensive network. That said, don't think for a moment that the Saxons abandoned their old beliefs overnight. It's more of a gradual blending, a cultural syncretism that sees elements of both pagan and Christian traditions coexisting. Imagine a feast where the gods of old sit alongside saints, each with their place at the table. It's a complex dance, one that reflects the Saxons' pragmatic approach to spirituality. Take what works, adapt what doesn't, and keep the ale flowing. Now, let's get back to debunking those myths that cling to history like barnacles on a Viking longship. There's a tendency to romanticize Saxon life as one of endless feasts, epic battles, and noble deeds. In truth, it's a tough gig. The average lifespan hovers around 30 to 40 years, not because of some cosmic injustice, but due to the harsh realities of disease, famine, and the occasional Viking raid gone awry. It's a world where the line between life and death is as thin as a farmer's plough, and survival is a daily negotiation with fate. The harshness of Saxon life is undeniable, yet amidst the strife there are simple joys that make it all worthwhile. The satisfaction of a well-tilled field, the laughter of children playing in the village square, the warmth of family gathered around the hearth. These are the moments that punctuate the struggle, the small victories that light up the darkest nights. It's a life of balance, where hardship and happiness walk hand in hand, each lending the other meaning. And let's not forget the sense of legacy that underscores every action. As a Saxon farmer, you're part of a continuum, a lineage that stretches back through the mists of time. Your toil in the fields isn't just about survival, it's about leaving something for those who come after. It's a legacy of resilience, a testament to the enduring spirit of a people who refuse to yield to the whims of fate. In the grand tapestry of history, your place might seem small, a single thread in the complex weave of time, but that thread is crucial, adding strength and colour to the whole. You're part of a story that's still being told, one that's rich with lessons and insights that resonate even today. As the evening winds down and you bid good night to your companions, remember that while the past is a foreign country, its echoes shape the world we live in now. So, as you lay your head down to rest, take pride in your role as a Saxon farmer, a guardian of the land and a keeper of traditions. The stars above may be the same ones your ancestors gazed upon, whispering their secrets across the ages. You're part of a legacy that transcends the centuries, a living link in the chain of human history. Sleep well, dear Saxon, for tomorrow's dawn brings new challenges, new opportunities, and the promise of another day in the life of Wessex. Your eyes flicker open to the soft light of dawn filtering through the paper windows. Welcome to the Sengoku period, where waking up at the crack of dawn isn't just recommended, it's downright mandatory. You're a young samurai student, and the day ahead promises a full serving of discipline, danger, and maybe a dash of dignity if you're lucky. The year is 1565, a time when Japan is a patchwork quilt of warring states, each vying for power like a game of go on a coffee binge. Before your feet even hit the tatami mat, you're already mentally preparing for the first challenge of the day, getting out of bed. Forget snooze buttons and morning lattes. Your alarm clock is the smell of incense mixed with the distant clatter of swords. You're living smack dab in the middle of the Sengoku Jidai, the age of warring states, a period where peace was about as common as a unicorn at a cattle ranch. Imagine a century of civil wars as over 200 daimyo or feudal lords squabbled like overgrown toddlers over Japan's fragmented territories. Your morning routine involves more than just brushing your teeth. First up, archery practice. Now, archery isn't just a skill, it's an art form, a way of life, and let's face it, a survival necessity. The bow, or yumi, is longer than your average NBA player, stretching nearly 7 feet. It's asymmetrical, a design that supposedly lets you shoot from a horse, though, let's be honest, it's a challenge even on solid ground. You've got to hit that target, or else you'll be the one dodging arrows in the evening skirmishes. And just in case you think you're stepping into a world of noble warriors straight out of a Kurosawa film, let's set the record straight. Being a samurai student doesn't mean endless glory. It often means endless chores. Your day involves more sword polishing than sword fighting. Believe me, the katana doesn't sharpen itself. Crafted by forging and folding steel in a process as complex as a modern tax return, these blades require constant care to maintain their edge and shine. You'd spend hours making sure your sword is ready for battle, even if that battle is just against the rust monster. Next on your to-do list is martial arts training, and this isn't your local dojo with a colourful belt system. This is the serious stuff: kenjutsu, the art of the sword, kyujutsu, archery, and even some sumo, because why not? You practice with a bokken, a wooden sword, because the real thing is reserved for when things get truly medieval. Now, speaking of myths, let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the samurai in the armour. The romantic image of the samurai as the epitome of honour and loyalty? Well, it's got some truth to it, but it's also been polished up like a katana for the tourist brochures. Sure, Bushido, the way of the warrior, was a real code, but it was more about practicality than philosophy. Loyalty was all well and good, unless your lord was losing, in which case it was time to rethink your allegiances. Remember, The Sengoku period was less about loyalty and more about survival. Daimyo switched sides as often as they changed kimonos, and samurai like you had to be ready to adapt or face the sharp end of a rival's sword. After your morning training, it's time to eat. Breakfast is a simple affair, perhaps a bowl of rice, some pickled vegetables, and miso soup if you're lucky. It's fuel for the day ahead, and you'll need it because political intrigue is as much a part of your life as physical training. You might overhear the elders discussing alliances, betrayals, and the occasional assassination over tea. The balance of power is as delicate as a geisha's fan, and being a samurai means keeping your ears open and your loyalties flexible. By mid-morning, you're attending to the less glamorous duties of a samurai student. This might involve tending to the horses, which, by the way, are more like ponies compared to modern steeds, but crucial for the mobility of your clan's forces. Or perhaps you're tasked with maintaining the armor, a time-consuming task of oiling and ensuring the lacings are in good condition. Remember, looking the part is half the battle, and an ill-maintained suit of armor isn't just embarrassing, it's a death sentence on the battlefield. And if you're still entertaining romantic visions of lone warriors strolling through cherry blossoms, remember that samurai were part of a complex societal machine. Your day involves endless training, yes, but also endless politics, diplomacy, and yes, even a bit of espionage. You're not just learning how to swing a sword, you're learning how to navigate the intricate web of alliances and betrayals that define Sengoku politics. As the sun climbs higher, the warmth in the air is a sharp contrast to the chill of political machinations. You might find yourself called to witness a meeting between your lord and a neighbouring clan's envoy. These meetings are tense affairs, where every word is weighed like gold, and a misplaced syllable could tip the scales from peace to war. As a young samurai, you're expected to learn from these exchanges, absorbing the lessons of diplomacy, even as you wonder if all the posturing is worth the trouble. The afternoon is filled with more training, perhaps a sparring session where you test your mettle against fellow students. This isn't just about physical prowess, it's a test of strategy, adaptability, and yes, a bit of showmanship. The clang of wooden swords echoes through the training ground, a reminder that the skills you hone here are the difference between life and death when the real metal meets flesh. As the day winds down, your thoughts might drift to the myth of the noble samurai, a narrative that's been polished and repackaged for centuries. The truth is, being a samurai student in 16th century Japan is as much about grit as it is about glory. It's a life of relentless training, political intrigue, and the constant awareness that the world is a shifting landscape of power and peril. You're not just learning to be a warrior, you're learning to survive in a world where peace is a fleeting dream and loyalty is a currency spent wisely. By the time evening rolls around, you're ready for a bit of rest, though not before another round of sword maintenance. You settle in, muscles aching, mind buzzing with the day's lessons. The art of the sword, the subtleties of diplomacy, the harsh realities behind the romantic sheen of samurai life. As you drift off, you can't help but wonder what tomorrow will bring in this volatile, vibrant era where the only constant is change. As you drift off, you can't help but wonder what tomorrow will bring in this volatile, vibrant era where the only constant is change. But before you lose yourself in dreams of cherry blossoms and epic duels, let me remind you, tomorrow starts bright and early at the dojo, where the real grit of samurai life gets hammered into shape like hot steel on an anvil. Now, the dojo isn't your average after-school karate class. It's more like a boot camp with a side of existential reflection. Here, you'll be pushed to your physical and mental limits, and then some. Your instructors? Battle-hardened veterans who view gentle encouragement as a foreign concept. Each training session feels like a mini battlefield where your opponents are not just your fellow samurai in training, but your own limits and expectations. Physical prowess, of course, is the name of the game. You're not just learning to swing a sword, you're honing your agility, reflexes, and endurance to a razor's edge. You'll practice the art of kenjutsu until your muscles scream and your mind is as sharp as your blade is supposed to be. And let's not forget the mental training, which is an equally brutal affair. Meditation isn't just about achieving inner peace, it's about preparing your mind for the chaos of combat. You're taught to focus, to empty your mind of distractions, to become one with your weapon and your surroundings. It's Zen with a side of bloodlust. While you're sweating it out on the dojo floor, let's talk brass tacks, or rather, Yen and koku, the currency of your world. The economic reality of being a samurai is far from the glamorous picture painted by folklore. Maintaining your gear is a costly affair. A suit of armor could set your lord back as much as 1,000 koku, which for context is enough rice to feed a family of 4 for a year. And that's just the armor. Factor in a katana, which could easily cost 100 koku, and you're looking at the medieval equivalent of a small mortgage. So how were samurai funded? Mostly through stipends from their daimyo, paid in koku. But like any good gig economy, it's not as straightforward as it seems. If your lord was winning battles and expanding his territory, life was good. You got paid, your gear got maintained, and the rice kept flowing. But if your daimyo was on the losing side, well, you might find yourself pawning your family heirlooms, or, worse, contemplating a career change to banditry. Economic pressures often shaped a samurai's loyalties more than any code of honor. Sure, Bushido preached fidelity, but when your rice salary was at stake, pragmatism often won out over principles. It wasn't uncommon for samurai to switch allegiances if a better offer came along. Remember, in the Sengoku period's chaotic dance of power, survival was the ultimate honor. As your day at the dojo winds down, the clatter of practice swords is replaced by the low murmur of conversation. You might hear your fellow students discussing the latest rumors, a neighboring daimyo changing sides, a new alliance forming, or an impending battle that could tip the scales of power. These aren't just idle whispers, they're critical updates that could affect your status, your income, and your very survival. And while we're demystifying the samurai myth, let's talk about the notion of the lone wandering warrior, the ronin. Romantic, isn't it? In reality, being a ronin often meant living on the fringes of society, a masterless samurai with no steady income or purpose. Sure, some ronin found success as mercenaries or teachers, but many struggled to make ends meet, reduced to odd jobs or worse. That legendary freedom came at a hefty price. As the sun sets on another grueling day of training, you return to your quarters, your muscles aching, and your mind buzzing with the day's lessons. You marvel at how the romanticized image of the samurai contrasts starkly with your daily reality of sweat, strategy, and the constant balancing act of loyalty and survival. The life of a samurai isn't just about wielding a sword. It's about navigating a complex web of social, economic, and political forces in a world where the stakes are life and death. Tomorrow promises more of the same: early morning training, political machinations, and the ever-present economic pressures that define your existence. In this world, the line between legend and reality blurs like the ink in a sumi-e painting, creating a picture that's as complex as it is captivating. So, rest up, young samurai. The path you walk is fraught with challenges, but it's also rich with stories waiting to be told. And so, as the first rays of dawn filter through the paper screens, the dojo calls again, demanding your presence and focus. But today, your path diverges from the usual sweat-soaked circuit. Midday brings a different kind of challenge, one of the mind rather than the body. You're about to dive into the cerebral world of strategy, a realm where battles are won or lost long before the first sword is drawn. Enter the world of strategic lessons, where your mind is the greatest weapon in your arsenal. You gather with your fellow samurai students, settling into the dimly lit room where the air smells faintly of ink and old parchment. Here, the focus isn't on the physical clash of steel, but on the delicate art of war. And who better to guide you than the tactical savant of the era, Oda Nobunaga? Ah, Nobunaga. A name that conjures images of brilliance and brutality. A man as revered for his strategic genius as he is feared for his ruthlessness. Now, let's get one thing straight. The romantic image of samurai as noble strategists, akin to chess masters with swords, has its appeal. But the truth is more akin to a high-stakes poker game, where the chips are lives and lands. In this world, tactics are as much about deception and cunning as they are about valor and honor. Cue Oda Nobunaga, the daimyo who played the game with a deck stacked in his favor. Nobunaga's strategic prowess is legendary, and for good reason. Take the Battle of Okahazama in 1560, a classic underdog tale if there ever was one. Imagine this: Nobunaga and his 3,000 men facing off against an enemy force 10 times their size, led by a rival daimyo, Imagawa Yoshimoto. The odds were so skewed that even a Vegas bookie would have hesitated to take bets. Yet, through a combination of audacious tactics and sheer nerve, Nobunaga pulled off a stunning victory. Using the element of surprise, he launched a sudden assault during a rainstorm, catching Yoshimoto's forces off guard. The result? A decisive win that turned the tide in Nobunaga's favor and cemented his reputation as a military genius. But let's not get too swept up in the myth without acknowledging the cold, hard reality. Nobunaga's victories weren't just about brilliant strategy, they were about brutal practicality. This was a man who understood that to win, you sometimes had to play dirty. When it came to sieges, he wasn't above employing scorched earth tactics, burning crops to starve out his enemies, or consider his use of firearms. Yes, guns had made their way to Japan by the mid-16th century, courtesy of some enterprising Portuguese traders. Nobunaga was quick to see their potential, integrating arquebuses into his forces, much to the dismay of traditionalists who saw gunpowder as an affront to the sacred art of swordplay. Of course, this brings us to the romanticized notion of the samurai as noble warriors, above the fray of such modern devices. In reality, the introduction of firearms transformed warfare in Japan, leveling the playing field and making brute force less of a deciding factor. Nobunaga's willingness to embrace this change was a reflection of his pragmatic approach to warfare. For him, the goal was simple: win, by any means necessary. Now, while you're pondering the intricacies of battlefield tactics, let's talk about the economic backdrop that often dictated these strategies. War, after all, is an expensive affair. Nobunaga's campaigns were fueled by wealth from trade and agriculture, and his economic acumen was as sharp as his strategic mind. He understood the value of commerce and opened up his territories to foreign traders, enhancing his coffers and ensuring a steady supply of resources. It's no wonder he became one of the most powerful daimyo of his time. Wealth and war tend to walk hand in hand. But before you start idolizing Nobunaga as the ultimate strategist, remember that his story isn't just one of triumph. It's also a cautionary tale about the dangers of ambition unchecked. Despite his successes, Nobunaga's overreaching eventually led to his downfall. In 1502, he was betrayed by one of his own generals, Akechi Mitsuhide, in a dramatic turn of events known as the Incident at Honnoji. Nobunaga's death was as sudden as his rise, a stark reminder that in the Sengoku period, fortune was as fickle as a summer storm. So, as you sit there absorbing these lessons of strategy and survival, remember that the romanticized image of the samurai strategist is only part of the picture. In the brutal world of 16th century Japan, where allegiances shifted like sand and the line between honor and pragmatism blurred, the true art of war was as much about adaptation and resourcefulness as it was about valor and honor. As the session wraps up, you leave with a head full of tactics and a newfound appreciation for the complexities of samurai warfare. It's not just about swinging a sword. It's about understanding the intricate dance of power, the delicate balance of offense and defense, and the ever-present need to adapt to changing circumstances. In this world, strategy is survival, and those who master it hold the keys to their own destiny. And with that, you step back into the sunlight, the world around you, a tapestry of opportunity and peril. The lessons of the day linger in your mind, a reminder that the life of a samurai is one of constant learning and adaptation. You may not know what tomorrow will bring, but armed with the knowledge of strategic genius, like Nobunaga's, you feel a bit more prepared to face whatever challenges lie ahead in this unforgiving era of warring states. As you step back into the sunlight, the rhythmic clatter of practiced swords fades into the background, and you prepare to swap your brawny ambitions for some brainy pursuits. That's right. It's time to switch gears from slicing through enemies to slicing through paper. Welcome to the cultural crash course that's as much a part of your samurai training as the art of warfare. Who knew that mastering the way of the warrior came with a side order of tea and poetry? First on the agenda, calligraphy, or shodo as they call it in these parts. Now, before you start imagining a serene room with gentle brushstrokes and philosophical musings, let's set the ink straight. Calligraphy in 16th century Japan isn't just about pretty characters, it's a high-stakes game of status and skill. Think of it as the Instagram of its day, where each brushstroke is carefully curated to impress the daimyo and outshine your peers. You'll be wielding a brush made from animal hair, dipping it into ink made from soot and glue. Yes, that's right, even your art supplies are hardcore. The importance of calligraphy goes beyond aesthetics. A single character can convey complex ideas, and the way you write those characters speaks volumes about your education and refinement. Mastering the elegant flowing strokes of kana or the precise angular kanji is your chance to prove that you're not just a brawn-over-brains kind of samurai. It's a subtle flex, showing that you've got the cultural chops to match your martial skills. Next up, it's time to channel your inner bard with some poetry, specifically the art of waka. Picture this. You, penning a 5-line tanka that manages to encapsulate the fleeting beauty of a cherry blossom, the impermanence of life, and maybe a dash of existential dread, all in just 31 syllables. No pressure, right? But in the Sengoku period, where the realities of war are ever present, poetry isn't just a pastime, it's a way to connect with the world and each other on a deeper level. It's also a diplomatic tool, a coded message that can express loyalty, dissent, or even romance without saying it outright. A well-crafted poem could earn you favor with your lord or even sway a political alliance, making it as sharp a weapon as any katana. But let's not romanticize this too much. Poetry, like everything else in your world, is tinged with politics. It's not just about expressing your innermost feelings, it's about crafting a narrative that aligns with the shifting allegiances of the time. A strategically placed poem could be the difference between a peaceful negotiation and a declaration of war. So, while you might be pouring your heart into your verses, you're also keeping an eye on the political winds, ready to adapt your message to suit the shifting landscape of power. And now, for the pied de résistance of your cultural education, the tea ceremony, or shanoyu. Forget the notion of this being a quaint little tea party. This is an intricate ritual steeped in symbolism, where every gesture, from the folding of the cloth to the whisking of the matcha, is a meditation on harmony and respect. It's a social dance where status and power dynamics play out over cups of frothy green tea. Imagine a room where the slightest twitch of an eyebrow can signal everything from approval to outright disdain. It's politics in a teacup, and you'd better believe it's as cutthroat as any battlefield. The tea ceremony was popularized by none other than Sen no Rikyu, the Grand Master of tea who turned sipping matcha into an art form. Riki's philosophy of wabi-sabi, finding beauty in imperfection, is a far cry from the blood and guts of the battlefield, yet it's just as vital to your samurai education. This isn't just about drinking tea, it's about embracing simplicity in a world that's anything but simple. It's also about knowing your place in the social hierarchy and navigating it with the grace of a dancer in a minefield. But let's not ignore the elephant in the tea room. This serene image has its dark side. Tea ceremonies were often used as a backdrop for power plays and political machinations. Invitations were exclusive, with a guest list that could make or break alliances. A misplaced comment or an ill-timed sip could spell disaster. It's no surprise that some lords used these gatherings to size up their rivals, and sometimes, if tensions ran high, the tea wasn't the only thing getting spilled. As you polish your calligraphy, pen your poetry, and perfect your tea ceremony etiquette, you're not just learning to be a cultured samurai, you're learning to wield culture as a weapon. This afternoon of cultural education isn't a break from your martial training, it's an extension of it. In a world where your reputation can be as fragile as the paper you write on, mastering these arts is just as crucial as mastering the sword. And with that, the sun begins to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the courtyard. You're left with ink-stained fingers, a head full of poetry, and a newfound appreciation for the intricate dance of power that defines every aspect of your life. The romantic image of the samurai as a solitary warrior fades, replaced by the reality of a multifaceted individual navigating a world as beautifully complex as a well-brewed cup of tea. As you return to your quarters, the lessons of the day linger. You've been reminded that beneath the armor and the bravado lies a deeper understanding of the world, one that values both strength and subtlety. In the Sengoku period, where the stakes are as high as they are volatile, every brushstroke, every verse, every sip of tea is a testament to the delicate balance of power and the art of survival. So, young samurai, as you settle in for the night, remember, the path of the warrior is not just about wielding a sword, it's about wielding wisdom, culture, and cunning in equal measure. And who knows? Perhaps tomorrow will bring new challenges and lessons, revealing more of the rich tapestry that is the life of a samurai in this endlessly fascinating era. As you settle into your quarters, the ink-stained memories of calligraphy, the rhythm of poetry, and the intricate dance of the tea ceremony swirl in your mind like the steam rising from a freshly poured cup of matcha. It's in the quiet moments like this that the teachings of Bushido, the way of the warrior, creep into your thoughts. Now, Bushido is often glorified as a samurai's guiding star, a code of conduct that demands loyalty, honor, and courage. But let's not kid ourselves. 16th century Japan made a habit of turning ideals into practical survival strategies faster than you can say seppuku. Think of Bushido as the samurai's philosophical Swiss army knife, polished, multifaceted, but ultimately a tool in a world where ideals were as slippery as a greasy eel. Sure, the idea of a samurai living and dying by an unyielding code sounds noble, but reality had a habit of throwing a monkey wrench into those works. For starters, the Sengoku period, with its backdrop of endless warfare and political machinations, was a breeding ground for betrayal and opportunism. Daimyo switched sides more often than a politician during an election year, and samurai were right there with them, adapting to survive. Consider the case of Takeda Shingen, one of the most powerful daimyo of the Sengoku era. Known for his strategic brilliance and military prowess, Shingen was a poster child for Bushido's contradictions. You see, his power wasn't just forged on the battlefield, it was also built through cunning alliances and, yes, betrayals. In 1569, Shingen allied with the Imagawa clan, only to turn on them when it suited his ambitions. Loyalty, it seems, had as many layers as an onion, and peeling them back often revealed a core of self-interest. And let's not forget the infamous incident at Honnoji. In 5082, Oda Nobunaga, that paragon of strategic genius, was betrayed by his own general, Akechi Mitsuhide. It's a tale that underscores the fragile nature of samurai honor. Mitsuhide's betrayal wasn't just a personal vendetta. It was a calculated move in the high-stakes game of power. In this world, honor was often a luxury afforded only to those who weren't fighting for their lives or their next meal. But here's the kicker. The romanticized image of the samurai doesn't just persist, it thrives. The allure of a warrior's unyielding honor is as seductive as it is misleading. It's the kind of narrative that survives because it simplifies a messy, complex reality into something palatable. After all, who doesn't love a good story with clear heroes and villains? Yet, the true legacy of the samurai is found in their ability to navigate the murky waters of politics and survival, not just in the purity of their ideals. As you mull over these contradictions, the economic realities of samurai life come into sharper focus. Living by the sword wasn't just a philosophical exercise, it was an economic necessity. A suit of armor, as you might recall, could cost up to 1,000 koku, a hefty price tag that demanded a steady income. Your stipend, paid in rice, was more than just a salary, it was your lifeline. In a world where your worth was often measured by your martial prowess and the armor on your back, the pressure to maintain your status was relentless. These economic pressures often dictated the course of a samurai's life more than any code of honor. Daimyo were like CEOs of mini-empires, managing resources, negotiating trade, and balancing the books in a way that would make any modern accountant break out in a cold sweat. And just like in today's gig economy, job security was a myth. If your lord fell out of favor, you were out of a job and possibly out of a head. Survival often meant aligning your loyalties with the highest bidder, and let's be honest, Bushido didn't pay the bills. So what then is the true legacy of the samurai? It's easy to get lost in the romanticized visions of noble warriors, but the reality is far more nuanced. The samurai were masters of adaptation, navigating a world where change was the only constant. In the end, it wasn't just about living by the sword, it was about understanding when to wield it, when to sheath it, and when to trade it for a plowshare. As the last light of dusk fades, you reflect on what it truly meant to live and die by the sword in this tumultuous era. The romantic image of the samurai is compelling, but the real story is found in the grit and resilience of individuals who forged their own paths in the face of uncertainty. Living by the sword was as much about pragmatism as it was about honor, a delicate dance of survival in a world where allegiances shifted with the wind. The legacy of the samurai isn't just etched in steel and ink, It's woven into the fabric of history, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who lived by a code that was as much about adaptability as it was about ideals. In this world, where the stakes were life and death, the true art of the samurai was in their ability to navigate the ever-changing landscape with a keen eye and a sharper blade. So, as you prepare to rest your weary head, take a moment to appreciate the complexity of this world you inhabit. The path of the samurai is a rich tapestry of contradictions, where honor and survival walk hand in hand. It's a reminder that in the dance of history, the steps are rarely straightforward, and the music is as unpredictable as the wind. Who knows what tomorrow will bring? But armed with the lessons of today, you face the future with the confidence of one who understands that the true path of the warrior is not just a matter of strength, but of wisdom, cunning, and resilience. If you think ancient laws were all about bearded old men arguing in musty rooms, think again. The world of Celtic law, particularly the Brehon law of ancient Ireland, is a vibrant tapestry of legal innovation and head-scratching oddities. Picture a time when legal minds were as sharp as their swords and their briefcases were their brains. Yep, folks, we're diving into a world where the Brehons, those legal maestros, memorized laws like a Spotify playlist, long before notepads and sticky notes cluttered our lives. Now, let's talk about these Brehons. They were the rock stars of the Celtic legal system, minus the groupies and leather pants. Imagine a society where, instead of lawyers in tailored suits, you had individuals who were essentially walking encyclopedias of legal wisdom. Brehons committed entire legal codes to memory. That's right, these folks could probably recite more laws than you have contacts in your phone, and they did it all without the help of caffeine, as coffee wouldn't hit Europe until much later. The sophistication of Brehon law is enough to make modern legal systems look like a game of legal monopoly. Instead of locking people up and throwing away the key, Brehon law was all about compensation, a concept that might leave modern justice systems feeling a bit insecure. The idea was simple. When wronged, a person was compensated based on their honor price, a value that reflected their social standing. It's like having your social media follower count determine your compensation package. So, if you were a king, your honor price would be through the roof, but if you were a commoner, well, let's just say you'd be lucky to afford a pint. This honor price system wasn't just about money. It was a reflection of the complex social hierarchy within Celtic society. The higher your rank, the greater your worth in the eyes of the law. It was a system that ensured everyone knew their place, while also providing a framework for resolving disputes without resorting to violence. In a way, it was like a medieval Yelp review system, one that could make or break your reputation, and therefore your compensation. Now, let's debunk some myths surrounding the Celtic justice system. For starters, the romantic image of a wise old druid dispensing justice under a sacred oak tree? Yeah, not so much. Brehons were more likely to be found convening in a client's hall than in some mystical forest clearing. Their role was about arbitration and resolution, not casting spells or invoking ancient deities. These weren't mystical wizards, they were practical legal experts who knew how to navigate a world where personal honor was currency. And here's a fun fact. Brehon law was one of the few legal systems at the time that actually took into account the rights of women. Women could inherit property, could divorce their husbands, and had their own honor prices. In a world where women were often seen as property themselves, this was a revolutionary concept. So, while other societies were busy debating whether women had souls, the Celts were already arguing who got the family cow in a divorce. As we unravel the myths and dig into the realities of Brehon law, it's clear that this legal system was not just a series of rules, but a reflection of a sophisticated society with a keen sense of justice. It was a world where your worth was measured not just in gold or cattle, but by your reputation and social standing. And while the idea of resolving disputes through compensation instead of incarceration might seem quaint today, it was a system that kept peace in a time when peace was often a luxury. So there you have it, a glimpse into a world where laws were not just written but lived, where justice was a matter of honor, and where the legal experts could probably out-memorize any 21st century trivia champion. Stay tuned as we continue to explore the twists and turns of Celtic legal history in the parts to come. Believe me, there's plenty more where this came from, and it's going to be a wild ride through the annals of ancient justice. So, let's dive deeper into the Celtic legal system, where the phrase cash cow takes on a whole new meaning. In this world, cattle weren't just animals. They were the economic backbone, the Bitcoin of their time. Stealing a cow was like hacking someone's bank account today, serious business. If you were caught with your hand in the proverbial cookie jar of cattle theft, you weren't just facing a slap on the wrist. Nope, you'd be liable for a hefty compensation, calculated in, you guessed it, more cows. Forget community service. You'd be parting with your bovine assets, which, given the importance of livestock, was about as painful as losing a smartphone with all your contacts and photos. The Celts had a knack for turning everyday life into a legal affair, and this extended into property laws. Land ownership was a communal affair. The land wasn't just yours to do as you pleased, it was a shared resource. Think of it as early socialism, but with more mud and less bureaucracy. This communal approach meant that disputes over land were commonplace, requiring a legal framework that could handle the complexities of multiple claims. The Brehons, ever the legal jugglers, would step in, ensuring that everyone got their fair share, or at least as fair as you could get when dividing up soggy fields. Marriage contracts under Celtic law were another area where the system showed its progressive flair. These contracts were as detailed as a modern prenuptial agreement, covering everything from dowries to property rights. Women had a significant say, and these agreements ensured that divorce wasn't a descent into chaos. Instead, it was a matter of legal negotiation, often involving a redistribution of cattle, because nothing says irreconcilable differences quite like dividing the family herd. It's as if the Celts anticipated the modern divorce court, but added a rustic twist, complete with mooing witnesses. And then there were the poets and jesters, the medieval influencers who wielded words instead of hashtags. These folks weren't just entertainers, they had legal rights that protected their craft. The Brehon law recognized the power of satire and storytelling, giving these artists a platform and legal standing. It's as if Shakespeare had a lawyer on speed dial, ready to defend his right to mock the nobility without ending up in a dungeon. These legal protections ensured that the poets and jesters could push boundaries, an essential role in a society where oral tradition was as sacred as the written word. The economic impact of these laws was profound. Livestock formed the bedrock of the Celtic economy. Cows weren't just food sources, they were living, breathing credit lines. The more cattle you had, the wealthier and more influential you were. It was a system that turned livestock into a kind of organic stock market, with wealth measured in hooves and horns. This emphasis on cattle meant that laws had to protect and regulate livestock ownership with the same seriousness we reserve for banking today. Debunking myths is part of the fun, and it's crucial to note that while the romantic image of the Celts is one of wild, untamed freedom, their legal system was anything but chaotic. The Brehon law was a structured, organized framework that governed everything from marital disputes to cattle trading. It was a system that prioritized restitution over retribution, showing that even in a time of tribal chiefs and warrior poets, there was room for sophisticated legal thought. And let's not forget the concept of personal space, a notion that the Celts took seriously long before it became a pandemic buzzword. There were laws protecting the sanctity of one's home and personal boundaries, ensuring that even back then you couldn't just waltz into someone's dwelling unannounced. It's a wonder they didn't invent "do not disturb" signs first. This respect for personal space extended into community interactions, with laws ensuring that disputes were resolved peacefully and with an understanding of personal dignity. The Celtic legal system was a tapestry of laws that reflected a society deeply connected to its land, livestock, and people. It was a world where poets had legal rights, cows were currency, and personal honour dictated justice. This was not a society of lawless warriors. It was a community that valued order, fairness, and accountability, with a legal system that was as nuanced as any modern code of law. As we continue our journey through the fascinating world of Celtic laws, remember, there's always more to the story than meets the eye. Stay tuned for more adventures into the annals of ancient justice. Trust me, it's a tale worth telling. So, as we wade deeper into the Celtic legal swamp, let's tackle a topic that gets a lot of romantic ink but often lacks real-world analysis: the role of women in Celtic law. Strap in, because it's a tale that combines empowerment and pragmatism, with a side order of not quite what you thought. First, let's bust a myth wider than a barn door. It's often painted that Celtic women enjoyed unparalleled equality, strutting around like ancient Spice Girls with legal rights that would make even the 21st century blush. But before you envision them leading board meetings in roundhouses, let's sift through some facts. Yes, Celtic women had more legal rights than many of their contemporaries across Europe. They could own property, and hold on to it too. No small feat when elsewhere women were often considered property themselves. They even had the nerve to initiate divorce, a concept as radical then as pineapple on pizza is today. But let's not start awarding equality medals just yet. The reality was more nuanced, like a good jazz solo. While women could own land, the type and amount were often dictated by their familial connections. Think of it as a medieval LinkedIn network. Your status depended largely on who you knew and what family you were born into. And while divorce was on the table, it wasn't exactly a walk in the park. The legal gymnastics involved were complex, requiring a level of negotiation that would make a modern lawyer sweat. This was no quick swipe right to freedom. It was more like a slow and tedious unfriending process. Now, let's talk about property rights. Yes, women could own land and livestock, but the devil, as always, is in the details. The Brehon Law laid out intricate rules about what a woman could own independently and what was considered joint property with her husband. It was like a medieval version of a prenup, minus the celebrity gossip. And here's a juicy tidbit. A woman could reclaim her dowry if her husband was particularly insufferable. That's right, if hubby failed to deliver on his matrimonial duties, she could demand her property back. It's as if the Celts foresaw the need for an early refund policy on bad marriages. But let's not get carried away thinking women were calling all the shots. While Brehon law recognized their rights, it also reinforced societal expectations that kept them in a supportive role. The idea was less about gender equality and more about maintaining social harmony. Women had to navigate a web of familial and societal obligations, often acting as mediators in disputes, both domestic and communal. It's as if they were ancient HR managers, ensuring everything ran smoothly while rarely getting the credit they deserved. And what about the legal standing of women compared to their European counterparts? Well, it was a mixed bag. In many ways, Celtic women were ahead of their time, at least legally speaking. Across the Channel, in places like Roman Britain, women were still largely stuck in the domestic sphere, with rights that barely extended beyond the kitchen. In contrast, Celtic women were out there managing estates, negotiating marriages, and even leading their clans in some cases. But let's not forget, these legal rights were often tied to their roles as wives and mothers. Step outside those bounds, and the legal safety net got a bit holy. Time to bring in some primary sources to paint a clearer picture. The Censures Ma, a collection of early Irish laws, gives us a glimpse into the legal intricacies surrounding women. It outlines everything from marriage contracts to the fines imposed for breaking them. According to these laws, women of higher social status enjoyed more significant legal privileges, but even common women had some rights. However, these rights were often contingent on male guardianship, whether a husband, father, or brother. So, while they had legal standing, it was often through the lens of male oversight. It's like being allowed to drive, but only if someone else has the keys. Let's not overlook the economic implications. The ability to own property and livestock wasn't just about power, it was about survival and influence. In a society where wealth was often measured in cattle, a woman's ability to manage her assets was crucial. This economic autonomy allowed some women to wield significant influence, especially widows who, without a husband to answer to, could become powerhouses of property management. Imagine them as the Warren Buffetts of their time, herding cattle instead of stocks, but with the same eye for opportunity. But here's the kicker. Despite these legal rights, societal expectations often reined them in tighter than a corset. Women were expected to uphold family honor and maintain social cohesion. The laws might have allowed them to own property, but societal norms often dictated how and when they could exercise these rights. It was a balancing act between legal entitlement and societal pressure. A game where the rules were written down but the playbook was constantly shifting. As we wrap up this whirlwind tour of Celtic women's legal rights, remember this, it's a story of contrasts. While they enjoyed rights that seemed progressive for the time, these rights were often conditional and closely tied to their relationships with men. The image of Celtic women as free agents of their destiny is romantic, but the reality was more about navigating a complex web of legal and social expectations. So, while the tales of warrior queens and landowning ladies are captivating, they're just one side of a multifaceted story. As we delve further into the labyrinth of Celtic lore, keep your wits about you. There's more to unravel in this saga of ancient justice. Stay tuned for more insights and revelations, because this ancient legal system is far from finished with its surprises. Just as we're untangling the web of Celtic women's legal rights, let's take a sharp left turn into the world of Druids, a place where religion and law collided with the force of two charging rams. Forget everything you think you know about Druids as mystical wizards with long beards and a penchant for foggy forests. In reality, these folks were less Gandalf and more legal consultants with a side hustle in spirituality. The role of Druids in Celtic society was as multifaceted as your favourite multi-tool gadget. Sure, they were spiritual leaders, but they also played a key role in the legal system. It's like having your local priest double as your lawyer. A combination that might seem odd today, but back then made perfect sense. Druids were the keepers of knowledge, and that knowledge extended to legal matters. They were the ones who knew the laws inside out, serving as advisors to the brehons and the community. And no, they didn't just wing it. They had a rigorous education system that could take up to 20 years. Think of it as a PhD program, but with more chanting and fewer student loans. Now, let's not get misty-eyed about the Druids under the oak trees, dispensing wisdom like ancient Siri. In reality, they were the power brokers of their time, wielding influence both spiritual and secular. The Druids' authority was rooted not just in their spiritual role, but also in their ability to interpret and apply the law. They were the ultimate multitaskers, balancing the scales of justice while keeping one eye on the spiritual well-being of the tribe. It was a delicate dance of power and influence, where a well-timed prophecy could sway a legal decision as much as a well-spoken argument. But as Christianity started making inroads into Celtic lands, the Druids' legal and spiritual monopoly faced some serious competition. Imagine trying to hold onto your favourite playlist while a new streaming service offers the same tracks plus a few exclusives. The arrival of Christianity was like dropping a new chess piece onto the board, a bishop, if you will, that changed the game entirely. Christian missionaries didn't just bring new religious ideas, they carried new legal concepts too. Suddenly, there was a new moral code in town, one that sometimes clashed with traditional Celtic laws. The influence of Christianity on Celtic law was like a slow-burning candle, gradually illuminating and reshaping legal practices. One of the most significant changes was the concept of sanctuary. In pre-Christian Celtic society, the idea of sanctuary was more about personal protection and less about hiding out in a church. But with Christianity's influence, churches became sanctuaries in the legal sense, offering protection to those seeking refuge. It was like having a get-out-of-jail-free card, but only if you could make it to the church doors before the proverbial gavel came down. The Synod of Whitby in 664 AD was another turning point, a historical moment where Celtic Christianity got the official nod over Roman practices in England. This wasn't just a theological debate, it had real-world implications for law and order. The Synod's decisions paved the way for a more unified Christian legal framework, further eroding the Druids' influence in legal matters. It was the beginning of the end for Druidic legal authority, as Christian laws began to take precedence over traditional Celtic ones. But before we pour one out for the Druids, let's remember that they weren't exactly saints or even bishops. The romantic notion of Druids as wise, mystical lawgivers is just that, a notion. They were pragmatic as much as they were spiritual, often using their legal knowledge to maintain their power. They weren't above politicking to get their way, and their influence often depended on the whims of the tribes they served. If you think modern lawyers know how to work a room, you haven't met a Druid with a vested interest in the outcome of a tribal dispute. So, what's the takeaway from this intersection of religion and law in Celtic society? It's a story of power, adaptation, and, ultimately, change. Druids may have started as the arbiters of law and spirituality, but they had to adapt or risk becoming irrelevant in the face of a new religious order. Their decline was gradual, but it marked a significant shift in Celtic legal history, as Christian concepts began to weave their way into the fabric of society. It wasn't just a change of faith, it was a change of legal philosophy, one that would shape the evolution of law in these lands for centuries to come. As we continue this whirlwind journey through the Celtic legal landscape, keep in mind that every law, every rule, and every change has a story behind it. It's a tale of human nature, power struggles, and the ever-present tension between tradition and innovation. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into this rich tapestry of ancient justice. There's more to the story, and it's only getting more intriguing from here. The decline of Celtic law is a tale of slow erosion rather than a dramatic overthrow, a bit like watching sandcastles succumb to the tide. By the time the Normans rolled in around 169, bringing with them their taste for castles and centralized authority, Celtic law was already feeling the squeeze from earlier Christian influences. The Normans were no fans of the Brehon system and its compensation-driven justice. After all, they had a penchant for Norman feudalism, where land was the ultimate prize and justice was often served with a side of fortified walls. The introduction of feudal law flipped the Celtic world upside down faster than you can say Domesday Book. Imagine waking up one day to find your communal land system replaced by a hierarchical structure that made Game of Thrones look like a family picnic. Land ownership became the domain of a few, often foreign, lords. This was a world where loyalty was bought with land grants, and justice was meted out according to the whims of those in power. For the Celts, who had been used to resolving disputes through a system that considered social standing and honour, this was a cultural earthquake. As the Normans established their hold, they introduced the jury system, a concept alien to the Celtic way of thinking. The idea of being judged by a group of one's peers, rather than a legal expert like a Brehon, must have seemed as bizarre as texting in Morse code, but it was effective in consolidating Norman power, binding the legal process to the landowners and away from the Brehons, who were left to shuffle off into a twilight of diminishing influence. The Brehon laws survived only in whispers and local customs, much like a folk tune that everyone knows, but no one officially sings. Despite the Norman stranglehold on legal matters, the Celtic system left its fingerprints on the legal landscape. The idea of compensation didn't vanish entirely. Even today, our legal systems have elements of restitution, though they're often buried under piles of paperwork and bureaucracy. The notion of honour price, while not directly translatable to modern society, hints at our current understanding of damages and compensation. So, if you ever feel shortchanged by your insurance payout, remember, it could have been worse. You might have had to haggle over cows. The legacy of Celtic law lingers in more than just legal theory. The Brehon system's emphasis on oral tradition and memorization echoes in modern legal education. While today's law students aren't exactly memorizing entire codes, the rigorous study of legal principles isn't far off from the Brehons' commitment to their craft. It's a bit like comparing vinyl records to Spotify playlists. Different formats, same tunes. But here's the kicker. The Norman invasion didn't just bring legal upheaval, it brought a cultural shift that would see the gradual decline of Gaelic culture, a process that, while not immediate, was inexorable. The new legal system was part of a larger strategy to integrate Ireland into the broader Anglo-Norman world, a world that valued centralized power and the rule of the monarch over tribal autonomy and local justice. The Brehon law didn't stand a chance against the sprawling bureaucracy of feudalism. Now, let's take a moment to imagine how some of our modern legal dilemmas might have been handled in a Celtic court. Picture this, a dispute over intellectual property. In the Brehon system, this might have translated into a disagreement over a particularly catchy tune or a memorable story. Instead of hiring a team of lawyers to battle it out in court, you'd likely see the Brehons step in to assess the honour price of the creative work. If they found the defendant guilty, they might have been required to compensate the artist with cattle or other goods. It's a bit like Spotify royalties, but in livestock form. Or consider a modern divorce case. Forget about dividing assets and custody battles in a sterile courtroom. In a Celtic court, the proceedings might have involved a detailed negotiation over the couple's cattle and land, with the Brehon ensuring that each party received their due according to their social standing and contributions to the marriage. Who knows, maybe the Druids would have thrown in a blessing or two for good measure, just to keep things amicable. As we wrap up this journey through the labyrinth of Celtic law, it's clear that while the system may have faded into the annals of history, its influence remains. The Brehon law was a testament to a society that valued personal honour, social standing, and peaceful resolution. It was a legal tapestry woven with the threads of tradition, pragmatism, and a dash of mystique. So, next time we're scrolling through your legal drama playlist, remember the Brehans and their cattle compensation schemes. They might not have had the glitz of a modern courtroom or the drama of a televised trial, but they knew a thing or two about keeping the peace in a world where cattle were currency and honour was everything. And who knows? Maybe there's something to be learned from a legal system that prioritised reputation over retribution, even if it involved more mooing than modernity. Sacagawea's story kicks off not with a bang, but with a cultural collision, an epic of its own kind. Born around 1788, she was a Shoshone girl destined for a future nobody could have scripted. Her roots were firmly planted in the Lemhi River Valley, present-day Idaho, where the Shoshone people moved with the seasons like clockwork, summers fishing for salmon, winters hunting bison. It was a life that seemed idyllic, until it wasn't. Enter the Hidatsa Raiders, stage left, circa 1800. At the tender age of about 12, Sacagawea was swept away from her family during a raid, a scene reminiscent of a Wild West drama with none of the Hollywood glamour. She was whisked off to the Hidatsa Mandan villages near present-day Bismarck, North Dakota. Talk about a change of scenery. This was the early 19th century, folks, when a change of address was often accompanied by a change of captors. Now, if you think the story couldn't get any wilder, hold on to your historical hats. Sacagawea was sold, or let's call it what it was, bartered, into marriage with Toussaint Charbonneau, a French-Canadian trapper who, by all accounts, had the grace of a moose on roller skates. Charbonneau wasn't just any fur trapper. He was a man with 2 left feet and a knack for clumsy negotiation. Known for his less-than-stellar reputation, he was akin to a walking blooper reel of the frontier. Charbonneau was a man who reportedly bought Sacagawea along with another captive woman, Otter Woman, in a trade that would probably make your local flea market look like a high-stakes auction. The going rate for a wife in those days? Somewhere around a couple of horses, if you were lucky. Sacagawea, not even a teenager yet, found herself in this bizarre domestic arrangement. The absurdity of it all is almost Shakespearean, except this wasn't fiction. Let's hit pause for a second and talk about the economic and social dynamics of the time. In the early 1800s, the fur trade was the equivalent of Silicon Valley startups today, a chance for fortune, adventure, and, quite often, utter chaos. Trappers like Charbonneau were the original gig workers, peddling pelts instead of apps. The stakes were high, the work was gritty, and the line between success and failure was as thin as a strand of beaver fur. The social fabric was equally tangled. Native American tribes, fur traders, and European settlers were all woven into a complex tapestry of alliances, rivalries, and uneasy peace treaties. Sacagawea's forced marriage was not just a personal tragedy, it was a microcosm of the larger cultural upheaval playing out across the plains. Now, let's talk about the elephant, or rather, the horse, in the room. The romanticized notion of frontier life, with its rugged individualism and endless opportunities, is a tale as tall as the Rockies. Sure, there were moments of breathtaking beauty and adventure, but they were overshadowed by the harsh realities of survival. Disease, starvation, and violence were as much a part of daily life as the picturesque sunsets over the prairie. Sacagawea's early life, stripped of its mythological veneer, was a testament to resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. She navigated a world that was, quite literally, wild and unpredictable, about as stable as Charbonneau on a canoe. Yet, despite the absurdity and adversity, Sacagawea's story was just beginning to unfold. She was on the brink of a journey that would defy expectations, rewrite her destiny, and ultimately forge her place in history as more than just a footnote. So, as we close this chapter of her early years, remember, the legend of Sacagawea is both more and less than the myth. She was a young girl thrust into a world not of her choosing, yet she adapted and survived with a strength that history often glosses over. Her story is not just one of exploration, but of endurance, and it's only just getting started. And so, Sacagawea found herself on the brink of yet another unpredictable chapter. Enter stage right, the Lewis and Clark expedition, otherwise known as the Corps of Discovery. This wasn't your average road trip. This was an 8,000-mile trek across the unknown, back when GPS was a guy with a telescope and a sketchbook. President Thomas Jefferson had a vision, a scientific and commercial reconnaissance of the Western Territory, purchased from France in the 1803 Louisiana Purchase for a cool $15 million. That's about 0.03 per acre, folks. A bargain even by today's standards if you ignore the whole ignoring the indigenous people's sovereignty part. The expedition needed someone who could do more than just point out which way was west. And while it's tempting to imagine Sacagawea standing there with a compass in hand, let's debunk that romantic notion right now. Her recruitment was less about trailblazing and more about diplomacy. Picture this: a pregnant teenager, not yet 16, who spoke Shoshone and Hidatsa. Her presence was not just practical, it was political. A woman and her child were signals of peace, not war, to the tribes they would encounter. Enter Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, two men with a combined charisma rivaling a pair of grizzly bears in a saloon. They were tasked with charting the terrain, documenting flora and fauna, and establishing trade relations. Their expedition was like an early 19th century version of a startup, with the backing of the government and a budget of $2,000, roughly $50,000 today. They needed to stretch those dollars, much like we stretch a paycheck until the next one rolls in. Enter Charbonneau, who pitched his wife's linguistic skills as part of a package deal. Lewis and Clark agreed, probably thinking of it as a buy-one-get-one-free situation, with Charbonneau tagging along as the proverbial unwanted side dish. The journey itself was a comedy of errors. If comedy involves the risk of starvation, hostile encounters, and unpredictable weather. The provisions list read like a bizarre survivalist's shopping spree: 93 pounds of portable soup, 130 rolls of pigtail tobacco, 30 gallons of high-proof whiskey, and a seemingly endless supply of ink and paper for documentation. Not to mention the tonnage of gifts meant to curry favour with native tribes, an assortment of beads, mirrors, and knives. Picture Oprah handing out gifts, but instead of luxury cars, it's trinkets and tomahawks. Then there was the journey's mode of transport: keelboats and pirogues, the SUVs of the river world. They were loaded with everything from scientific instruments to enough gunpowder to make an action movie proud. And let's not forget the one Newfoundland dog, Seaman, who was probably the only one with any real navigation skills. It was a logistical nightmare that would give modern project managers cold sweats. Sacagawea, meanwhile, wasn't just tagging along for the ride. Her linguistic skills were crucial in negotiations, especially with the Shoshone. Without her, the expedition might have ended in a standoff rather than a handshake. She was also a living, breathing symbol of peace, her very presence a message that said, "We come in peace." Also, we have no idea what we're doing. The mythology often portrays her as a guide, but let's be honest, Lewis and Clark weren't lost in the woods, they were lost in the concept of the woods. Sacagawea wasn't holding their hands like some frontier GPS, she was facilitating crucial introductions and negotiations. Her knowledge of the land did come in handy, like when she recognized landmarks near the Shoshone territory, which helped secure horses for crossing the Rocky Mountains. But she wasn't the one drawing up maps or plotting courses. The journey was fraught with challenges, not least of which was the weather. Picture trudging through snowdrifts taller than you and crossing rivers that could sweep away a horse. The expedition faced the kind of adversity that makes a bad day at the office look like a vacation. Yet, amid the chaos, Sacagawea stood firm, even giving birth to her son Jean-Baptiste along the way. Talk about multitasking. She carried him in a cradleboard as the expedition pressed on, arguably the most challenging bring your child to work day in history. Sacagawea's son, affectionately nicknamed Pomp by Clark, became another symbol of the expedition's peaceful intentions. His presence reassured the tribes they encountered, a subtle yet powerful message that these strangers weren't the vanguard of an invading army. Lewis and Clark might have been the expedition's figureheads, but Sacagawea and her son were its heart, quietly communicating what the explorers' words could not. As the core of Discovery made its way westward, they faced fierce rapids, towering mountains, and the ever-present threat of running out of food. The journey was a balancing act of diplomacy, survival, and scientific curiosity. They documented everything from new animal species to the culinary delights, or lack thereof, of dried fish and dog meat. Sacagawea, with her resilience and adaptability, became an invaluable asset, not just a side character in a larger narrative. So, while the myth paints her as a hero with a compass, the reality is richer and more complex. Sacagawea was a bridge between worlds, a crucial part of an expedition that was as much about cultural exchange as it was about discovery. Her story is woven into the fabric of American history, a tale of endurance, adaptability, and quiet strength amid a backdrop of chaos and camaraderie. As we leave this chapter, remember, the legend of Sacagawea is not just in what she did, but in the subtle ways she shaped the course of history. Stay tuned, because this saga is far from over. So, as the ink dried on another chapter of Sacagawea's evolving legend, the core of discovery had its sights set on the looming Rockies. Now, if you think crossing these bad boys was as simple as hiking a scenic trail, think again. This was no leisurely stroll. This was Survival 101 in an unforgiving landscape that could chew you up and spit you out faster than you can say, manifest destiny. The Rockies were a natural fortress, a jagged line in the sand that separated the known from the unknown. For the expedition, crossing them required more than just a sturdy pair of boots. It needed horses, and lots of them. Enter Sacagawea, who was about to reunite with her long-lost brother, Kameawait, the Shoshone chief. Talk about a dramatic family reunion. This was like finding out your Uber driver is also your cousin. This reunion wasn't just a sentimental hallmark moment. It had massive economic and political stakes. Horses were the currency of the plains, and Kameawait held the keys to the kingdom. The expedition was on a budget tighter than a drum, with resources dwindling and winter nipping at their heels. Without these horses, Lewis and Clark's grand vision could end up as nothing more than a snow-covered footnote in history. The Shoshone, strategically positioned in the Rockies, were key players in the vast trade networks that crisscrossed the region, connecting indigenous tribes with European and American traders. Sacagawea's presence was the expedition's diplomatic ace, a living bridge to her people whose goodwill was essential. This wasn't just a personal drama, it was geopolitics on horseback. Now, let's not sugarcoat it. The journey through the Rockies was brutal. The expedition faced some of nature's worst tantrums, blizzards, freezing temperatures, and terrain that would make a mountain goat think twice. The romantic image of noble explorers braving the Wild West? More like a desperate scrabble through hell, with frostbite and starvation lurking at every turn. Romantic, right? Yet, amid this struggle, Sacagawea's reunion with Kameawait was a bright spot. Her brother's willingness to provide horses was a lifeline, a turning point that kept the expedition from falling apart like a poorly made tent. The Shoshone saw in this exchange an opportunity for alliance and economic advantage. They weren't just giving away horses, they were investing in future trade relationships and the potential benefits of American expansion. The economic implications were huge. Lewis and Clark weren't just explorers, they were emissaries of a burgeoning nation hungry for land and resources. Their success would pave the way for waves of settlers, transforming the economic landscape of the West. The Shoshone, aware of the shifting tides, navigated these waters with as much cunning as the explorers themselves. And let's talk about those horses. In today's cash, a horse was worth its weight in gold. They were the all-terrain vehicles of their time, capable of carrying precious cargo over mountain passes and through river valleys. The Shoshone's gift of these beasts was a savvy move, a strategic play that underscored their understanding of shifting power dynamics in the region. Despite the mutual benefits, the encounter wasn't without tension. The expedition's presence signaled change and encroachment on native lands that would have lasting repercussions. The Shoshone, like many tribes, were caught in the crosshairs of expansion, negotiating their survival amid a landscape of shifting allegiances and broken promises. As Sacagawea navigated this complex tapestry, her role was both celebrated and understated. She was a vital link, not just a passive participant. Her journey through the Rockies wasn't just a physical crossing. It was a testament to her resilience and adaptability, qualities that were as essential to the expedition's success as any map or compass. Meanwhile, the explorers contended with the harsh reality that their romanticized adventure was more about endurance than glory. The Rockies, with their stark beauty and perilous paths, were a reminder that nature, unlike humans, doesn't negotiate. It demands respect and exacts a toll on those who underestimate it. But triumph they did, emerging from the mountains like bedraggled heroes in a tale that was part epic and part survival saga. They were now poised to push westward, their sights set on the Pacific, with Sacagawea continuing to be their indispensable ally. In the grand narrative of exploration, Sacagawea's story is often overshadowed by the men she travelled with. Yet, without her, the expedition's fate might have been sealed in those snowy passes. Her reunion with Sacagawea was more than a personal victory. It was a pivotal moment in a journey that would reshape the continent. As we leave the Rockies behind, the expedition's path unfolds into new territories, with challenges and opportunities that would test the mettle of all involved. Sacagawea's role remains as critical as ever, an anchor in the storm, a guide in more ways than one. Stay tuned as we follow the core of discovery into the next chapter. The journey is far from over, and history is waiting just around the bend. As the core of discovery emerged from the Rockies, their boots barely holding together, they set their sights on the Pacific with the determination of caffeine-deprived office workers on a Monday morning. This wasn't just a geographical shift, it marked the start of their return journey, a trek as daunting as the one that brought them here. The Pacific wasn't just a destination, it was a promise of new beginnings, trade opportunities, and the sweet, sweet smell of manifest destiny. The expedition's findings were like gold nuggets in a pan, sparking the fire of American expansion. President Jefferson's vision of a coast-to-coast nation wasn't just a pipe dream, it was now a blueprint, thanks in part to the detailed maps, flora and fauna catalogues, and notes on the native tribes that Lewis and Clark meticulously documented. Their travels proved that the vast expanse of the Louisiana Purchase wasn't just a gamble, but a jackpot waiting to be claimed. As they turned eastward, these intrepid explorers were about to transform the landscape of American history, one ink-drenched page at a time. But let's pause and ponder the cost of this grand narrative. The romantic image of discovery often glosses over the harsh reality of displacement and cultural upheaval. The expedition's success spelled profound change for the native tribes. For many, the core of discovery were the advance party of a tidal wave of settlers who would soon follow, bringing with them the promise and threat of a new world order. The Shoshone, Mandan, and other tribes faced a future as uncertain as the path through the Bitterroots. Now, let's zoom in on Sacagawea, who was more than just a footnote in this logbook of exploration. As the expedition made its way back, her role remained pivotal. Her knowledge of the land and its people continued to be a guidepost, even when the explorers fancied themselves seasoned veterans of the frontier. Her story didn't end with the expedition's triumphant return to St. Louis in 1806. In many ways, it was just beginning. After all, life after the spotlight is where legends are truly forged or forgotten. Post-expedition, Sacagawea's life took on a quieter, yet no less significant path. She and Charbonneau received payment for their service, $500.33 for Charbonneau, a sum that today would barely cover a month's rent in a modest city apartment. Sacagawea, on the other hand, received nothing directly. Her contribution was seen as part of the package deal with Charbonneau, a stark reminder of the gender dynamics at play. In the economy of the early 19th century, her invaluable diplomatic and linguistic skills were bundled and undervalued, much like a free app download that comes with annoying ads. The couple settled near the Mandan villages, and Sacagawea's life seemed to slip back into the folds of domesticity, a world away from the grand stage of exploration. But history has a funny way of keeping its characters alive, even when they fade from the spotlight. Sacagawea's legacy was far from over. It was about to take on a life of its own in the American imagination. Fast forward to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when Sacagawea's story was lifted from the pages of Lewis and Clark's journals and thrust into the mythological orbit of American folklore. She became the poster child for grit and determination, her image plastered on statues and plaques as a pioneering heroine. Yet, this narrative often glossed over the complexities of her life and the systemic forces that shaped it. The romanticized version of Sacagawea as a guide with a heart full of wanderlust is as accurate as a tabloid headline about alien encounters. The discrepancies in historical accounts of Sacagawea's death add another layer of intrigue to her story. Some sources claim she died in 1812 at Fort Lisa, North Dakota, succumbing to an illness. Others suggest she lived a long life, passing away in 1884 on the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming. The latter account, while less accepted by historians, has fueled the legend of Sacagawea as a resilient survivor, living into old age among her people. It's a tale that appeals to our love of a good underdog story, even if it's more fiction than fact. Primary sources such as Lewis and Clark's journals, paint a picture of a young woman navigating a world of uncertainty with remarkable composure. Yet these accounts often reduce her to the background, an auxiliary character in a grand narrative dominated by men. This contrast between lived experience and historical portrayal highlights the enduring tendency to simplify complex lives into neat, digestible stories. As the expedition's findings trickled back east, the impact on American expansion was profound. The data collected by Lewis and Clark helped fuel the westward movement, giving settlers the confidence to venture into new territories. The promise of fertile land and untapped resources was a siren song that drew countless families into the unknown. It was the dawn of a new era, one where the myth of the West as a land of opportunity took root. Yet, for Sacagawea, the reality of life post-expedition was likely one of quiet resilience, far removed from the legends that would later bear her name. She was, in many ways, a bridge between two worlds. One foot in the past, the other in a future she helped shape but could not fully partake in. Her story serves as a reminder that history is written by those who record it, often leaving out the voices of those who lived it. As we pause here, consider the duality of Sacagawea's legacy, a symbol of courage and exploration, yet also a testament to the complexities of identity and the narratives we choose to embrace. Stay tuned as we continue this journey, unraveling the threads of a tale that's far from finished. The final chapter awaits, ready to reveal truths that might surprise even the most seasoned history buffs. Sacagawea's legacy is a complex tapestry woven from threads of myth and reality, each strand adding depth and dimension to the story of a woman who straddled two worlds. As we dive into the enduring legacy of Sacagawea, it's crucial to peel back the layers of romanticized mythology and examine the gritty truths that lie beneath. Her tale, often sanitized for the history books, is a testament to human resilience and adaptability in a world as unpredictable as a frontier thunderstorm. Let's start with the basics. Sacagawea's post-expedition life was far from the glamorous tales spun by later generations. While her journey with Lewis and Clark has been immortalized, her quieter years afterward were marked by the realities of early 19th century life disease, displacement, and the struggle for survival. It's crucial to recognize that her story didn't end when the expedition wrapped up in 1806. Sacagawea continued to live in a world where her contributions were largely invisible to those who held the power to record history. Fast forward to the late 1800s and early 1900s, when Sacagawea's name began to resurface in a big way. This was the era of the American West's romanticization, when the wild frontier was tamed not just by settlers, but by storytellers eager to craft heroes from the past. Sacagawea was elevated to the status of a legend, her image sculpted into statues, and her story woven into the cultural fabric of a burgeoning nation. Yet, this version of Sacagawea as the noble guide, the selfless helper of Lewis and Clark, is as much a product of myth-making as it is of historical fact. It's the kind of narrative that fits neatly into our collective need for heroes, but it often flattens the nuances of her life into a one-dimensional portrait. Consider, for instance, the proliferation of Sacagawea statues across the United States during this period. These monuments, while intended to celebrate her contributions, often depict her as a stoic figure pointing westward, a visual metaphor for the myth of westward expansion. But let's be real. Sacagawea wasn't standing on a mountain peak with one hand on her hip and the other pointing dramatically toward the Pacific. Her journey was far less theatrical and far more about survival, negotiation, and navigating a world rife with cultural collisions. One of the most significant misinterpretations of Sacagawea's legacy is the notion that she was a mere guide, leading Lewis and Clark through the wilderness with the innate wisdom of an indigenous GPS. In reality, her role was far more nuanced. She was a translator and a diplomat, a bridge between cultures in a time when misunderstandings could mean the difference between life and death. Her linguistic skills and knowledge of tribal customs were indispensable, but they were part of a broader skill set that included navigating complex social dynamics and maintaining peace among diverse groups. The economic context of Sacagawea's story is also essential to understanding her legacy. During the early 1800s, the fur trade was the economic engine driving much of the interaction between native tribes and European settlers. Sacagawea's journey with the Corps of Discovery was not just a scientific expedition, it was an economic venture with high stakes. The expedition opened the door to new trade routes and opportunities, setting the stage for the westward expansion that would follow. In this context, Sacagawea's contributions were part of a larger economic narrative, one that would have profound implications for the indigenous peoples whose lands were being explored and eventually settled. As we reflect on Sacagawea's legacy, it's important to confront the realities of her life and the broader historical forces at play. The romanticized version of Sacagawea as a heroic guide often obscures the fact that her life was shaped by the same forces of colonization and displacement that affected so many indigenous peoples. Her story is a reminder that history is not just about the grand narratives of exploration and discovery, it's also about the individual lives caught in the crossfire of these larger events. Sacagawea's enduring legacy is also a testament to the power of storytelling and the ways in which historical figures are remembered or forgotten by future generations. Her story has been told and retold through various lenses, each interpretation reflecting the values and aspirations of the time. In the early 20th century, as women's suffrage gained momentum, Sacagawea was embraced as a symbol of female empowerment, her image co-opted by suffragists eager to showcase strong women from history. Yet, this too was a selective reading of her life, one that often ignored the systemic inequalities she faced. In contemporary times, Sacagawea's legacy continues to evolve as historians and storytellers strive to present a more nuanced portrait of her life. This includes acknowledging the harsh realities she endured, such as being forcibly taken from her Shoshone family and sold into marriage at a young age. Her resilience in the face of such adversity is a testament to her strength, but it also highlights the broader issues of exploitation and marginalization that defined her era. Sacagawea's story is far from a simple narrative of triumph and adventure. It's a complex tale of survival, negotiation, and adaptation in a world that was rapidly changing. Her legacy invites us to look beyond the myth and engage with the gritty realities of history, to understand the human experiences that underpin the grand narratives of exploration and expansion. As we wrap up this exploration of Sacagawea's legacy, let's leave behind the romanticized myths and embrace the complexities of her life. Her story is a reminder that historical figures are more than the sum of their mythologies. They are individuals with rich, multifaceted lives, shaped by the forces of their time, yet contributing to a legacy that transcends their era. Sacagawea's journey with Lewis and Clark may have ended over 2 centuries ago, but her story continues to resonate, challenging us to question the narratives we accept and inspiring us to seek out the truths that lie beneath the surface. In the end, Sacagawea's legacy is not just about the journey she took, but about the enduring impact of her contributions. Her story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of individuals to shape history, even when their voices are marginalized or forgotten. As we reflect on her life, let's strive to honor her true legacy by embracing the complexity and richness of her story, and by recognizing the broader historical forces that continue to shape our world today. So, next time you see a statue of Sacagawea or hear her name mentioned in the context of American exploration, remember the woman behind the myth. Remember her as a young Shoshone girl who faced unimaginable challenges and rose to meet them with courage and strength. Remember her as a bridge between cultures, a diplomat in a time of great change, and a reminder that history is not just about the grand narratives, but about the individual lives that contribute to the tapestry of our past. The Incan Empire, sprawling over 2,500 miles of the Andean mountain spine, wasn't just a powerhouse of architecture and agriculture. It was also a civilization that wove its identity quite literally into every fiber of its social fabric. Forget gold. In the world of the Incas, textiles were the real treasure trove. And while that sounds like a dream for your average fabric enthusiast, it also meant that the Incan economy was tangled up in a rather peculiar form of currency threads. Let's start by untangling the notion that the Incas used textiles merely as a fashion statement. Sure, they had style, but there was more to it than just looking good in a poncho. Textiles were the lifeblood of their society. Think of them as the apple stock of the Andes. They didn't just drape themselves in these colourful creations for the sake of vanity. No, these were the threads that held their economy together. Quite literally, cloth was currency, and it was used to pay taxes, perform rituals, and even as offerings to appease their gods. Imagine having your net worth calculated in alpaca wool instead of dollar bills. Sounds cozy, albeit a bit scratchy. Now, If you're picturing a bunch of Incan grandmas knitting away in the sunshine, let's clear that up. Weaving was more than a pastime. It was a highly sophisticated craft that involved entire communities. Men and women alike participated, though it was predominantly in the hands of skilled women who were experts in this craft. These weavers could create everything from simple, utilitarian garments to elaborate textiles that were so intricate, some pieces could take months or even years to complete. The precision and skill required were nothing short of astounding, and it was this expertise that made their textiles so highly valued. In fact, some of the most luxurious fabrics were produced by the Acalis, also known as the Chosen Women. These women were selected for their beauty and skill, and they lived in convent-like settings where they spent their days weaving textiles for the elite. So, while the rest of the world was busy chasing silk, the Incas were already miles ahead, swaddling themselves in the finest vicuña and alpaca wool. And before you start thinking that these textiles were a niche market, let's talk numbers. Archaeologists have unearthed over 34,000 textile fragments from a single Incan site. That's like stumbling upon an entire fashion week's worth of catwalk couture in one go. But why were these textiles so important? Well, in a society without a written language, textiles served as a form of communication and record-keeping. The patterns and colours woven into each piece carried specific meanings, narrating stories, illustrating status, and even marking historical events. Each thread was a stitch in the story of the Incan Empire, making textiles both a cultural artifact and a historical document. The Incas didn't leave behind scrolls of parchment, they left behind spools of history. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, the romanticized notion of the Incan Empire being all about harmony and unity. While it's true they had a sophisticated society, don't be fooled into thinking everyone was skipping through the Andes holding hands. The truth is, the Incan Empire was an intricate web of power and control, and textiles played a central role in maintaining that structure. The Sapa Inca, or the emperor, used textiles as a political tool, doling them out as gifts to secure loyalty and allegiance from various regional leaders. It wasn't just a matter of keeping warm, it was a matter of keeping the empire from unraveling at the seams. Speaking of weaving political webs, consider how textiles were part of the Incan tax system. The Incas didn't have currency as we know it. Instead, they practiced a system called mita, a labour tax, where citizens contributed work to the state. Part of this labour included producing textiles for the empire. Imagine telling your accountant you've paid your taxes in scarves and tunics this year. It might not fly with the IRS, but in Inca land it was perfectly acceptable. This system ensured that the state always had a supply of high-quality textiles at its disposal, which could then be redistributed as needed. Of course, the romantic image of textiles as currency has its downsides. The harsh reality was that weaving was not just an art, but a labour-intensive duty. The pressure to produce could be extreme, especially for the Acalis, who were essentially sequestered to weave under constant supervision. And while the final products were masterpieces, the process to create them was no leisurely affair. It was a reminder that even the most beautiful creations often come at a steep price, sometimes paid in the sweat and toil of those who crafted them. So, as we unravel the threads of Incan society, it becomes clear that textiles were much more than a fashion statement. They were a testament to the empire's ingenuity and its ability to weave a complex social and economic system from the simplest threads. From the hills of Cusco to the valleys of Machu Picchu, the Incas spun a civilization as colourful and intricate as the textiles they cherished. Stay tuned as we continue to explore this vibrant world. There's a lot more yarn left to spin. Now, diving deeper into the world of Incan textiles, let's put the spotlight on those unsung rock stars of the Andes, the weavers. These artisans were not merely skilled hands, but rather the virtuosos of their era, spinning a legacy as intricate as their tapestries. In a society where the loom wasn't just a tool, but an extension of culture, weavers held a status akin to that of today's tech innovators. They were the Steve Jobs of the spindle, crafting not just garments, but the very threads of civilization. In the Incan hierarchy, weavers were placed on a pedestal, and rightly so. Their skills were revered, and they were often exempt from the more grueling, muddy aspects of Incan life, like working the terraces or hauling stones for those massive architectural feats. Instead, they were ensconced in craft, their hands weaving history one thread at a time. This elevated status wasn't just ceremonial, it was embedded in the social fabric. When your textiles are as valuable as gold, the hands that create them are nothing short of precious. But let's not get too misty-eyed. There was a bizarrely specific division of labour at play here. The Incas, in their quest for efficiency, had broken down the weaving process into specialised tasks. Imagine an assembly line, but instead of churning out Model Ts, they produced textiles that could rival a Picasso. Some weavers were tasked with spinning the finest threads, while others focused on the intricate patterns that could send a modern mathematician into a tailspin. This wasn't just about making clothes, it was about creating a masterpiece of economic and cultural significance. Now, let's talk about those intricate designs and patterns. Forget paisley or plaid, these were the Rolls-Royce of motifs. Each one a status symbol that told the world who you were and where you stood in the pecking order. The complexity of a textile could denote anything from regional identity to personal achievement. A simple tunic could be elevated to power suit status with the right arrangement of colours and shapes. It was a visual language, a wearable biography that could be read by anyone who knew the code. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. The patterns weren't just decorative, they were functional too. In some cases, these designs acted as mnemonic devices, helping to record crucial information in a culture without a written language. Imagine your entire family history or local laws woven into your Sunday best. It's like carrying around a Kindle on your back, but far more stylish. But let's not get carried away with the romance of it all. Time to poke a few holes in those mythical powers attributed to the weavers. Some tales would have you believe these artisans wielded a kind of magical prowess, able to summon the gods or predict the future with a flick of their spindle. While that's a charming notion, it's more likely that their mystical abilities were simply the result of a deep understanding of their craft, honed over years of grueling practice. These weren't wizards with warp and weft, they were highly skilled professionals whose magic was really just expertise wrapped in a shroud of cultural significance. And let's not forget the economic context here. These textiles were a big deal, economically speaking. They weren't just for personal adornment, they were traded, gifted, and even used to solidify alliances. When an Inca noble draped themselves in a particularly luxurious piece, it wasn't just about fashion, it was a bold statement of wealth and power, akin to cruising down the street in a brand new Ferrari. The more intricate the design, the more labour and resources it required, and therefore the more it signified about the wearer's social clout. It was a high-stakes game of sartorial one-upmanship, where the stakes were woven in every stitch. In this bustling tapestry of Incan life, weavers were both the creators and custodians of culture. Their textiles were the threads that held society together, both literally and metaphorically. As we continue to unravel the complexities of the Incan Empire, it's clear that these artisans were not just spinning yarns, they were spinning the very essence of a civilization. And while the romantic image of the mystical weaver might be just a myth, the reality is no less magical. They were the architects of a legacy that continues to captivate us, one thread at a time. But before we wrap up this yarn, let's not forget the human element. The reality of life as a weaver wasn't all high status and artistic glory. It was often a demanding and relentless pursuit, governed by the whims of the elite and the needs of the empire. While the weavers might have been the rock stars of their day, it's worth remembering that even rock stars have to pay their dues. And in the Incan world, those dues were paid in the currency of time, skill, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. So, as we continue to explore the vibrant world of the Incas and their remarkable textiles, let's keep in mind that while the myths might be enchanting, the truth is even more compelling. The story of the Incan weavers is one of artistry, innovation, and the enduring power of human creativity. And as we delve deeper into this fascinating culture, there's still plenty more to discover. Stay tuned for the next chapter in this colourful saga. There's a lot more history to weave. So, as we continue to explore the vibrant world of the Incas and their remarkable textiles, let's keep in mind that while the myths might be enchanting, the truth is even more compelling. The story of the Incan weavers is one of artistry, innovation, and the enduring power of human creativity. And as we delve deeper into this fascinating culture, there's still plenty more to discover. Stay tuned for the next chapter in this colourful saga. There's a lot more history to weave. Now, speaking of weaving, let's unravel the political tapestry where Incan textiles played a role far beyond the loom. In the high-stakes game of diplomacy, these fabrics were as potent as any declaration, serving as both olive branches and veiled threats. In an empire where a single woven cloak could make or break alliances, the stakes were as high as the Andean peaks themselves. Picture this. You're an Incan ruler, eager to expand your empire without the messy business of bloodshed. What's your move? You send a lavish textile to a neighboring chieftain, of course. This wasn't just a fashion statement, it was a strategic maneuver. These textiles were the covert emails of the ancient world, threaded with political intent. A finely woven alpaca cloak could say, "Join us, and you'll be part of something grand," while a simpler piece might suggest, "Comply, or your fashion sense won't be the only thing under threat." But let's not get too carried away with the romance of peace offerings. The truth is, these textiles were often a soft power tool in a hard power world. When persuasion failed, the Incas weren't above using textiles as a prelude to conflict. A refusal to accept a textile gift was tantamount to a declaration of war. Imagine the ancient equivalent of leaving someone on read. The tension was palpable and the stakes were high. These weren't just garments, they were the threads of diplomacy spun with the finesse of a seasoned statesman. And talk about logistics. Moving these precious, woven wonders across the Andean terrain was no small feat. We're talking about transporting hefty bundles of textiles through treacherous mountain paths where a wrong step could mean curtains for your carefully crafted cargo. The Incas, with their genius for infrastructure, had built an extensive road network spanning over 24,000 miles, an achievement that would make even modern civil engineers blush. But even with these impressive roads, the task was daunting. Imagine llama caravans, those sturdy, sure-footed beasts of burden, clambering over rocky trails with textiles packed like the treasure they were. And let's give a nod to the Shaski, those human relay runners who sprinted across the empire like ancient FedEx couriers. These were the unsung heroes of the Incan logistics machine, ensuring that textiles reached their destinations faster than you could say alpaca sweater. But hold on a moment. Before we romanticize the notion of textiles as the ultimate peacekeeping tool, let's address the other side of the coin. The Incas were adept at using textiles to subjugate and control. These weren't just diplomatic gifts, they were symbols of dominance. By weaving their culture, quite literally, into the fabrics, the Incas asserted their superiority. Conquered peoples were often required to produce textiles for the empire, a constant reminder of who held the loom strings. And while we're on the subject, let's not forget the economics. Textiles were a currency, yes, but they were also an investment in political stability. The production and distribution of these fabrics required a well-oiled machine of artisans, labourers, and administrators. It was a supply chain that would put today's corporate operations to shame. This wasn't just about keeping warm, it was about keeping control. Now, we can't talk about textiles and politics without mentioning the grand spectacle that was the Incan statecraft. When it came to state-sponsored events, textiles were the red carpet, literally and figuratively. The Sapa Inca, the emperor himself, would be draped in textiles so ornate they could blind a peacock with envy. These were the high-fashion statements of authority, the haute couture of hegemony, each thread a testament to the empire's reach. It was an act of visual intimidation, a reminder that in the land of the Incas, power was woven, not just wielded. But let's not sugarcoat it. The romantic notion of a unified Incan empire, held together solely by the gentle touch of textiles, is just that, a notion. The reality was a complex web of alliances, rivalries, and power plays. Textiles were the backdrop to this political theatre, but make no mistake, the stakes were real, and the players were ruthless. It was a world where the loom was as much a tool of control as the sword. And yet, through all the intrigue and machinations, one thing is clear. Textiles were the silent witnesses to history, bearing the weight of civilizations upon their woven shoulders. They were the unsung heroes of an empire that spun its destiny in wool and thread. As we continue to untangle the threads of this remarkable story, it's clear there's still much to unravel. The Incan world was one where textiles were both the medium and the message, a testament to the power of human creativity and the enduring legacy of those who dared to weave their mark on history. So, as we journey further into the heart of the Andes, let's keep our eyes peeled for the threads of truth woven into the fabric of myth. There's more to discover, more to explore, and plenty of loom left to weave. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over, and the next chapter promises to be just as colourful as the textiles themselves. As we pick up the thread of our tale, let's weave our way into the spiritual and ceremonial labyrinth of the Incan Empire, where textiles weren't just a fashion statement but a spiritual lifeline. Now, if you've ever thought about attending a sacred ceremony wrapped in a heavy woolen blanket, you're in good company. That's pretty much how the Incas rolled. But before you start picturing a group of Andean monks huddled up for warmth under layers of alpaca, let's unravel the rich tapestry of symbolism these textiles represented. In the spiritual world of the Incas, textiles were more than just garments, they were tangible connections to the divine. Picture this. You're an Inca high priest, preparing for an elaborate ritual. You're not just tossing on any old poncho. No, you're donning a textile imbued with sacred symbols, each thread meticulously woven to invoke the blessings of the gods. These pieces were like wearable altars, dense with iconography and meaning, each design a prayer sewn into the fabric. Take, for instance, the unque, a traditional Incan tunic. What looked like a simple piece of clothing was actually a canvas of cosmic geography. Designs often included motifs representing celestial bodies, mountains, and rivers, essentially a map of both the physical and spiritual world. This wasn't just about looking good for the deities, it was about aligning oneself with the cosmos, a sartorial GPS for navigating the divine. And speaking of the divine, let's talk about the ceremonies themselves. Incan rituals were no small affair. These were grand spectacles, complete with offerings, music, and, of course, textiles. During important festivals, the emperor and his entourage would be draped head to toe in the finest fabrics, each piece a testament to their divine right to rule. It was a bit like walking a sacred runway, where every step resonated with spiritual significance. Now, let's not get too enchanted with this picturesque scene. The practicality of swathing yourself in layers of heavy wool during a ceremony is questionable at best. Imagine trying to perform a sacred dance while tripping over your own hemline or sweating under the Andean sun. But in Inca culture, it wasn't about comfort, it was about connection. The act of wearing these textiles was an offering in itself, a sacrifice of ease for the sake of spiritual alignment. And it wasn't just the living who enjoyed these textile wonders. The dead were equally well dressed, their journey to the afterlife paved with the finest fabrics. Incan burials often included textiles as grave goods, ensuring that the deceased entered the next world with both style and status. These were no mere hand-me-downs, they were custom-made, sometimes even incorporating gold and silver threads. It was a final testament to one's earthly achievements, a sartorial send-off fit for an emperor, or at least someone who wanted to be remembered like one. But let's unravel the myth of the Incan afterlife as an eternal textile utopia. While these garments were certainly symbolic, they also served a more practical purpose. In a world where belief in the afterlife was as woven into the social fabric as the textiles themselves, these grave goods were a form of social insurance. They ensured that the deceased maintained their social standing, even in death. It wasn't just about looking good for eternity, it was about preserving one's status in the cosmic order. Now, let's address the elephant, or should I say the llama in the room, the notion that these textiles were imbued with magical properties. While it's tempting to imagine ancient spells woven into every corner, the reality is a bit less mystical. The magic of these textiles lay in their craftsmanship and the cultural significance they carried. They were a testament to human creativity and the power of symbolism, not the result of supernatural intervention. And speaking of intervention, let's consider the role of textiles in Incan religious rituals. These weren't just static objects, they were active participants in the ceremonies. Textiles were used as offerings, draped over altars, or even burned in sacrificial fires to appease the gods. It was a literal sacrifice of wealth and labour, an acknowledgement that even the most beautiful creations were temporary in the grand scheme of life and death. But before we get too wrapped up in the romance of textiles as divine offerings, let's spare a thought for the weavers. These artisans were the unsung heroes behind every ceremonial textile, their labour and skill often overlooked in favour of the finished product. For them, each piece was a labour of love, a testament to their dedication and craftsmanship. It was a reminder that behind every thread of Incan spirituality lay countless hours of human effort. So, as we continue our journey through the vibrant world of Incan textiles, let's keep in mind that while the myths may be enchanting, the truth is even more compelling. These textiles were not just garments, they were the threads of a complex belief system, woven with the same care and precision as the culture they represented. And as we delve deeper into this fascinating story, there's still much more history to unravel. The Incan world was one where textiles were both the medium and the message, a testament to the power of human creativity and the enduring legacy of those who dared to weave their mark on history. Stay tuned for the next chapter in this colourful saga, because there's a lot more loom left to weave, and the story is far from over. The threads of truth are waiting to be discovered, and the fabric of myth is yet to be fully unravelled. So let's continue to explore, question, and celebrate the remarkable world of Incan textiles, one stitch at a time. So, as we pick up our thread from the spiritual and ceremonial labyrinth of the Incan Empire, let's fast forward to today. You might not be swaddled in a sacred unqueue on your way to the grocery store, but the legacy of Incan textiles is very much alive and kicking in contemporary art and fashion. And no, it's not just about ponchos making a comeback at your local bohemian boutique. The influence of these ancient threads is visible on the world's fashion runways and in the studios of modern artists who view the Incan approach to textiles as more than just a throwback Thursday. Designers like Vivienne Westwood and brands like Prada have drawn inspiration from Incan motifs and colour palettes, giving a nod to the intricate designs that once narrated the stories of an empire. In fact, the global textile market, which hit around $961.5 billion in 2021, often borrows from this rich tapestry of history, proving that ancient fashion is anything but passé. But let's not get too carried away romanticizing these modern interpretations. While it's thrilling to see ancient patterns walk the runway, there's a fine line between homage and appropriation. Some might argue that lifting these designs without acknowledging their cultural significance is akin to swiping someone's hard-earned work and calling it your own, a sartorial faux pas, if you will. It's a reminder that while fashion can be a beautiful tribute, it can also tread dangerously close to cultural insensitivity. Now, let's talk economics. The Incas weren't just weaving for the sake of art, their textiles were economic powerhouses. Today, the textile industry in Peru is a vibrant sector, employing thousands and contributing significantly to the GDP. The legacy of Incan weaving has turned into a tangible economic force that still supports communities, proving that these threads are as economically vital now as they were centuries ago. In the art world, Incan textiles have inspired countless contemporary artists who admire the skill and symbolism woven into every piece. For example, Peruvian artist Ana Teresa Barbosa takes the Incan tradition of storytelling to new heights with her textile art, which often explores themes of nature and human connection, a modern twist on an ancient narrative device. Her work is a reminder that these textiles were never just about aesthetics, but were imbued with deeper meanings that continue to resonate today. But let's unravel the myths a bit more. It's easy to get swept up in the romance of the Incan Empire as a lost utopia of peaceful artisans who were just a bit too fond of wool. The reality is that their society, like any other, had its share of complexity and conflict. The textiles were not just symbols of harmony, but often tools of power and control. In other words, it's time to swap the rose-tinted glasses for a pair that sees the full spectrum. So why do these myths persist? Well, there's something irresistibly charming about the idea of a sophisticated civilization wrapped in colourful threads, keeping warm against the harsh Andean winds. It's a narrative that appeals to our desire for a simpler, more harmonious past, a yearning that often glosses over the gritty details in favour of a more palatable story. Yet, despite the myths, the enduring legacy of Incan textiles is undeniable. They continue to captivate us, not just as relics of a bygone era, but as vibrant threads that connect us to a shared human history. They remind us of the power of creativity, the importance of cultural identity, and the intricate ways in which economics, politics, and art are woven together. And let's not forget the practical side of things. While the Incas didn't have the luxury of modern machinery, their techniques were nothing short of revolutionary. Today we might chuckle at the idea of paying taxes in scarves, but their system of textile-based economy was a stroke of genius that ensured resource distribution and social cohesion. In an age where efficiency often trumps artistry, there's something to be said for a society that valued both in equal measure. So, as we wrap up our journey through the warp and weft of Incan history, what can we take away from this colourful legacy? Perhaps it's the realization that textiles, whether ancient or modern, are more than just fabric. They are cultural artifacts, economic drivers, and political statements, each thread carrying the weight of history and human ingenuity. They are, quite literally, the threads that bind us, sewing together past and present in a continuous tapestry of human experience. In conclusion, while the myths of the Incan Empire may be woven with a bit of romantic embroidery, the reality is no less compelling. These textiles were the heartbeat of a civilization, a testament to its artistry, resilience, and complexity. And as we continue to explore the rich tapestry of human history, we find that the legacy of Incan weaving is not just a relic of the past, but a vibrant thread that continues to inspire and connect us today. So next time you slip on a sweater or admire a piece of textile art, take a moment to appreciate the ancient hands that first spun these threads, the stories they told, and the legacy they left behind. Because in the end, history isn't just something we read about, it's something we wear, something we live, and something that, just like a well-woven textile, holds us together.